Hey everybody, if you want to skip right to the interview, skip to 7 minutes. But before you do, please rate, subscribe, follow me on social media, and please tell a friend. Thanks. All right, episode number 49 of the podcast. Today's episode is with my buddy Ankur. We met in Lister. We didn't know each other too well back then, but over the last couple of months, we've been chatting a little bit. He also has a podcast with a couple of his buddies. It's called The Cusp Pod. And, they talk about all sorts of things, kind of just seeing day-to-day life from people their age, younger 20s, and kind of showing what the young intellectual viewpoint on some of maybe the day-to-day events and whatever's happening in the world, whatever interests them. And it's a very interesting podcast. I think that's why maybe you can tell on this Ankur is such a good speaker, and I think that's because he does have his own podcast, and I definitely want you guys to go check him out. As soon as you're done this episode, pop over, check through the episode, see if there's one that you that piques your interest, and give it a try. He's a really smart kid, and his friends are also quite intelligent. It's kind of fun to get the younger generation's take on some of these bigger issues. I mean, I love listening to the Joe Rogans of the world, and all these older guys that definitely have a solid worldview that has been built upon years and years. But it's also kind of fun to hear some younger guys take a crack at it and see how they see the world, and kind of maybe some of the similar points as some of these older guys, but you can just tell it's a little bit more of a fresh perspective, a little less jaded and a little more hopeful. So I'm definitely always a fan of that, and I think you guys will be too. Other than that, things are going well for me. Had a nice little trip up to Edmonton this weekend. Watched the Oilers beat the Flames 2 nights in a row. Watched Connor McDavid have another 5-point night. That always is a big boost for me, picking up my mood when I get to see something like that. So that was awesome for me personally. Recorded a banger of an episode for episode 50. I think you guys are going to really like it. My buddy T, who's one of my best friends in university, actually one of the first guys that I ever met there, moving in on the elevator before school had even started, just kind of crossed paths with him. And then over the years, just kept getting closer and closer. So we had a really fun conversation, so I'm excited for you guys to see that one. Got my new computer built. If anybody's following the social media for the VonDubCast, you got to see this process of this computer coming to life. I've probably received over 20 texts of people saying, "What are you doing? That computer is way too powerful. You don't need that. You're an idiot." But that's exactly what I wanted. I told Liam, who was on episode 2 of this podcast, actually, who helped me build a computer, ordered all the parts, and is still helping me troubleshoot it as I'm recording this intro. He's actually installing all the drivers and stuff. So I'm so excited to get that flashed up and ready to go. I think there'll be a couple things for the podcast that I'm able to do once I have that computer up and running. And then also, like I've mentioned, kind of here and there throughout all the podcasts in the last couple of months, I'm really looking forward to taking a swing at streaming. It scares the shit out of me. I'm terrified of it. And I think that's usually where the best things in life are, is where you're really scared of it and really excited. I'm excited too, but I'm also, nervous. It's something new. And I think it's going to help this podcast, help me get better here. And hopefully this podcast helps me get better at streaming. And I hope you guys enjoy that. I hope there's maybe some people that podcasts aren't their thing, but maybe they like to watch people stream video games. And I plan on playing the whole gambit. I think I got laughed at when I was showing some people this big ass computer I built, and they said, "Well, what are you going to stream? What are you going to stream?" And I was like, "Oh no, probably some N64 games." I'm like, "Well, why did you build this stupid computer if you're only going to be playing N64 games?" It's like, well, I'm not just going to be playing that, but if you think I'm not going to be playing some, Ocarina of Time and some Pokemon Red randomizers and shit like that, you're crazy. I mean, definitely going to pop in the old war zones and Fortnites and all the stuff that the kids are watching these days. Take my crack at it, see if this old bastard can squeak into the game there. But I definitely got to kick it old school with some of the things that made me, and kind of maybe reminisce on some of the old school Star Fox and all that kind of stuff, because that's right up my alley. I often will go on some nostalgic gaming binges, or I used to. I guess I haven't done it in a really long time, but this streaming thing is kind of my hope at regaining something that I love. I used to love video games and play them all the time, but then life gets crazy. You become an adult and you don't really have time to do it. And I found that, if I can make streaming something that is making me better at this podcast and becoming something that I can do in the future as a actual part of, not just income. I mean, that is a big part of it, but just something that is actually part of my career. I think that would be awesome to get paid to play video games and have conversations, right? Like I said a million times on this podcast, it's not about the money, but it's just about the freedom to be able to support myself and the people I love with doing things that I love. And I think that is a noble goal, and I'm going to keep chasing it till I can chase it no more. And I'm excited for it. Again, nervous as shit, but super excited. So that's coming down the pike. Not sure what else. I got a lot on the go, and there's some things coming. Hoping to get some more in-person episodes recorded. I have all my new equipment, my new mics. I kind of got the walkthrough this weekend of how to run them all and set them up. So I'm hoping to do a couple trips in the next couple months, maybe one trip down to Slave Lake and record a bunch of episodes with my old friends, and maybe a trip to Lloydminster. I have a bunch of people over there that I want to interview. I'm going to be doing trips to Edmonton all the time to record, and that's kind of standard, but maybe one down to Calgary and wherever else I can find people to record now that I have kind of my soundboard and these, Shure mics that I'm hoping sound even more beautiful than this. Actually, you'll get to hear on episode 50, we set those new mics up in the studio and gave them a first crack. So hope you guys like it. Hope it works out for you. Something I forgot to say. Partway through this podcast, my computer runs out of space and I had to, and it stopped the recording. So I quickly deleted a few things on the fly, like the professional I am, and got us back up and running. So at this point, I'm not even sure what I deleted to make room. I was kind of in a panic at that point, and that is why I would love to have a full-time producer so I don't have to worry about those types of things. But, figured it out on the fly. I feel like there was something else I wanted to mention about the podcast. Maybe it was something else to prepare you guys. Who knows? It was good. I enjoyed it. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. I meant to make this a little bit of a shorter intro, and I've already gone for 7 minutes here. So I'll wrap it up and let you guys dive into this interview. And like I say every week, if you can tell a friend if you like this episode, if you think this one would be one that they would enjoy, pass it on. That's how these things grow. Following my social media pages, that's huge, and subscribing on whatever podcast app you listen to, a subscription really helps. And also, if you really want to go the full Monty and really throw me a bone, you can leave a review, 5 stars preferably. I mean, hey, if you think I suck, throw a 1 star on there. I don't care. Give her, boys and girls. I don't know. I've said this a million times. I just get rambling and I don't know where I'm going, and I need to just stop talking and jump you guys right into this pod. Let's roll, boys. I gotta stop saying boys. It's not boys. Boys and girls. Boys, girls, everything in between, everyone listening, lizards, cats, dogs, let's go. Beautiful. All right. Thank you for being here. Another lister guest. I told people I'm going to start getting away from that, but then they just keep coming back. Thanks for being here, Ankur.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be on the VonDubCast.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a different one, I guess, from maybe some of the other lister guests, because I think lots of the lister guests were some of my closer friends, and me and you were in lister, but we weren't. We're a couple of years different. So, what year did you come to lister?
2014.
2014.
Yeah, I started in 2014, and I remember we connected just loosely. It was like loose friends, just because of like common friends like Alex Placetti, Cuggy, Ryan Edelman, Saad, those boys.
Yeah. So what floor were you on in your first year?
10K.
10K.
So I was on 10K the year where it was like the weird like wolves howling thing. It was like
right.
Yeah, that was us. We were a wild crew.
Yeah. Oh, I do remember that now that you say that. Oh yeah, and Ryan Edelman. Oh, perfect. So how was that? How was that for you? What did you think of Lister when you first got there? How much did you know about Lister before you got there?
Bro, it was like so all I knew is it was like a huge, big res. Like I knew it was a big res. So a little bit of context about myself. So I'm 25 now. I entered Lister when I was 18. And at that time in my life, I was like living, I don't want to say repressed, but I was living in a South Asian household that was strict. And so, you have a dog on a leash and the dog just wants to run away from the leash. And all of a sudden there's all this momentum and then it just gets let go. That was me in first year Lister. I was ready to party. I was like, I was there and I was ready to just go after it. And I simultaneously had a great experience and a bad experience. A great experience in the sense that I got to party, I got to have a lot of fun, I got to really enjoy myself. The difficult part was just adjusting to being a fully fledged adult and adjusting what my identity was outside of a high school context or outside of my parents' house context, right? So that was difficult for me to adjust, but overall, I think Lister was a good experience.
Yeah. And it's funny for people listening, they probably, they see that and can really I'm sure there's lots of people that can equate themselves with that story, of, being on that leash and having that freedom and letting everyone run. But I think what people don't understand is what Lister becomes is that 1,800 times over, because there's all these kids with that same experience and they all get let loose at once. And that's what Lister creates. It kind of funnels some of that magic of what that is into one area, and then lets people make those mistakes and find out who they are in a somewhat safe, confined space. Right. And I think that's the other side of it. It kind of gives it a little bit of leeway where you can push those boundaries and still be safe and kind of come back to it. And it allows you to go through that process, because that's tough for everybody to have their first venture outside of their parents' house and be, learning how to be an adult, like you say. And it's funny to watch how beautiful it turns out, when I think that could also be a recipe for a lot of disaster when you think of all those things that go together. And it's almost a beautiful thing to see how it does come together, and how people, create those communities and those families on those floors, and really shores up all those pitfalls that are very clearly there with that many 18-year-olds full of hormones and freedom to go out and just make their mistakes. Right. It's quite the special place. It's very special to me. And I feel like people are probably that listen to this podcast are getting sick of hearing about it, but it is a special place. And I think it'll be a special place for a long time, hopefully for generations to come. Yeah, knock on wood, right? Yeah, I don't know if you got to listen to any of the podcasts with me and Sam, right? From going back, talking about all the LHS.
I need to. It's on my list, because it's this is like something that I heard happened before I came, and I was always like, note to self, you should learn more about this at some point. And then I saw your podcast, and I'm like, that's the answer to the note to self. Let's listen. Let's take a listen.
Yeah. So going back before Lister, so you were born in Nepal. What age did you move to Canada?
I was so born in Nepal. I moved to the States when I was 2.5. First of all, right. My dad was doing his PhD in the United States, and so my older brother, myself, my mom, we all just like flew across. I had never met my dad up until that point. So when I first met my dad, I had met so many uncles, and in Nepalese culture, your mom's brothers are called mama, and so I was like, "Oh, nice to meet you, mama." And my mom was like, "Nah, dude, this is your dad." And so she had to like explain it, and then after a while, I realized, "Oh, this is my dad." So I had to form that relationship, and so lived in the States for a bit. Lived in Toronto. Calgary is my hometown. That's where I grew up. So grew up in Calgary, and then came up to Edmonton for university. So that's kind of like the spiel.
Right. So what part of the U.S. was your dad doing his PhD in?
Idaho. So he did his PhD in Idaho. Yeah, he did his PhD in Idaho. I don't know too much because I was super young, but I do remember we moved a lot then. We moved to Denver for a bit, which was a great city. I still love Denver. We moved to Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Wow.
Which is like hilarious to me, but that was like when I was like, some of my earliest memories are playing on the playground in Stillwater and like going over to my friend's house for like chocolate cake and everything.
So then what age did you move to Calgary then? Like that sounds like a lot of bouncing around, but at what age did you kind of settle in Calgary and have that stability?
10 to 18. So I was 10 years old when I was in Calgary, and I had up until 18. And so Calgary is the city where I think I had my most formative growth in terms of like, growing. When you're 10 years old, you're literally a kid, versus when you're 18, you're like ready for university. And so that was that time.
And, one thing that I've, just listened to so many podcasts, you listen to a lot of people's stories and kind of the common threads. And one of those threads is people that bounce around a lot when they're in those young formative years. It does something to a personality. It can do multiple things to a personality, but some people take it each way. And some people, that really teaches them how to become that chameleon for different settings. And you can, blend in and that. And then some people kind of shut down. They find, a certain core people that they trust in each setting, and they don't branch out a lot. What do you think that bouncing around did to you? And kind of when you did finally land in Calgary, what kind of parts of your personality do you think that affected? And do you think it set you up positively for moving forward, or do you think that hindered you at all?
I think I had the perfect balance. My brother kind of got screwed because he's older. He's like 6 or 7 years older. And so when he bounced around, he was in his formative years. Right. So the friendships that he was developing, he didn't get to really dive deep into them because he was moving so much, right? Whereas with me, when I bounced around, I was kind of in my younger years. And at that point, I was kind of just figuring out, the earlier parts of my identity. And one of the things that I grasped was like, there's a term called code switching, where where like people are able to switch between different dialects, and it's very common for like second generation kids like myself who I speak Nepali at home. I have a whole South Asian community that I know from my family friends. Then I also have like a community from school that's extremely diverse, people from all across the country, all walks of life. And so I kind of learned, and this is a skill that still benefits me to this day, how to just blend into different environments, how to talk about different things. Like when I was in high school, for example, I was on the basketball team and I was in advanced placement English. Yeah. So I was down to talk about like Shakespeare, and I was down to talk about 1984 and all these books. And then I'd go shoot the shit with my basketball homies, right? And it was like, well, let's talk about hip hop, let's talk about basketball, let's talk about girls. And like I could flip that switch easy. And so that was one thing that I didn't realize at the time, but in hindsight, I was like, oh, I developed that skill over just like being exposed to all these different environments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that's such a important skill, I think, for people, and the ability to do that, or maybe the lack of opportunity to do that when the ability is there, is also harmful. I mean, I think I was in a very similar state, growing up. I loved talking all that nerdy shit. I was all about it, but most of my friend group was not into that sort of thing, and I got very good at talking hockey and talking those types of things, the more athletic side of it. But then the more intellectual side, I felt I very rarely got to explore that side. Maybe at home, my sister was very intelligent, she was older, sometimes we would, but we fought like cats and dogs until we got to a certain age where we could converse, right? So I felt like
makes sense.
so I felt like for me, I always knew that I had that ability to talk about all these things and a real hunger to talk about all these things with people, but I was always very constricted in what types of conversations I could have. And then when I went to university, it was like blowing the doors off that, going from a small town of, 5,000 to 7,000 people to, a residence that has almost 2,000 people in it, just of your direct compatriots. Right. And it was just such an experience for me. And it was so eye-opening, and really, what made it tough, I think, to go back once I graduated, to move back home. It was a hard switch to not have that and have all these outlets to bring yourself. And I think that was something I struggled with probably up until I started this podcast, because that was something where I got this 4 years of an amazing experience. If I want to talk sports, I can still do that. I still have, those kinds of friends. But then if you want to talk AI, or you want to talk about this, you want to talk about that, there's people all around to have these types of conversations. And then moving back into, moving to Grand Prairie, where most of my relationships and things revolve around work. Right. And not only do you not have the intellectual conversations, you're not even really having many of the sports conversations because all your friends aren't there. Right. And I felt like starting this podcast is my outlet now. I might not be able to do it all the time and have those conversations, but I know at least a couple times a week, I'll be able to sit down with someone where I can explore a bunch of different tangents, right? I'm sure we'll go all over the map on where this conversation is going to go today.
Which I love.
It's so much fun, right? And I feel like lacking that. And I feel like so many people don't realize that they're lacking that. I feel like there's a lot of people in society today, they feel a lack, but they don't know what that lack is. And I think it's a lot of things, right? I think it's community. I think the loss of religion has really put some holes into people that they don't know what they're feeling. But I think a big one is just conversation, long form conversation. Our cell phones have disjointed that. Even if you are in a room with someone, you're going to talk for a while, it's going to be pulling out your phone and, talking about Instagram and, reading a couple of memes while you're doing it. And it's not really that deep connection where you look somebody in the eye and you talk for a couple of hours. I feel like that's so missing from people. And that's why podcasts are so popular, because people can sit down and feel like they're in that conversation. And sometimes it's frustrating because you can't, get your 2 cents in. I was listening to some of your podcast leading up to this interview and this week. And there's a couple of times there where I'm just sitting there like, oh, I want to get my 2 cents in and I want to talk about those things. Right. And it's a little bit frustrating, but I find, that frustration is so paid off by getting that experience of being in those conversations. And I feel like 100%. That was when I moved to Grand Prairie here. I was lacking a lot of those conversations, but I would find them through podcasts, and that kept me sane and kept me learning and kept me growing. And I felt like that was so huge to me that now if I can offer that opportunity to somebody else, that'd be awesome. And maybe just since I already mentioned it, maybe you could tell me a little bit about how, what your podcast is and maybe how it got started. 'Cause I'm very curious about that.
Sure. I co-host a podcast called The Cusp, everyone. I co-host it with, let's start off with, two good friends, Tony and Tom. We're like good friends from business school. So we all went to business school together. We have years of friendship. We have existing group chats that we talk about. April of this pandemic, Tony messaged us. He's like, hey guys, if I did like a podcast episode, would you two appear? And, we were bored. Like, you remember April, last year, it was like freaking Tiger King was on. You're just making Dalgona coffee, trying to figure this shit out. Like, oh, how does Zoom? You feel like an old man trying to figure Zoom out.
Just waiting for the next episode of The Last Dance to come out. Pretty much that was.
We got to get into that after. But yes,
okay, I'll write it down.
Yes. Yeah. Last Dance is I loved Last Dance. Anyways, Last Dance, all that kind of stuff, all that jazz. And I wasn't working at that time either. I was kind of between jobs before I got my next one. And so I was just trying to figure out something to do. And then Tony was like, do you want to do this podcast? Do you want to record a podcast episode? I get on a call with them and they're like, all right, guys, what are we going to call our podcast? And so we started talking about podcasts, and funny enough, we got into this argument, and the argument was, are we Gen Zs or are we millennials? Right. Cause we're all born in 96 and we're in this like weird place. And I was like, oh, I'm a millennial. And Tom was like, I'm a millennial. And Tony's like, yeah, fuck you guys. I'm a Gen Z. Right. Yeah. And so we got into this argument, and I remembered we were like, we're kind of like on the cusp of a generation. And we were starting to talk about this idea of being on the cusp, and we just called it The Cusp. And so the podcast is basically exploring issues in contemporary culture and current events from the perspective of, how does this impact our generation, or just stuff that our generation is curious about. And, I think for us at first, the podcast was very much just like, let's just throw this out and see what happens. And the further and further we got into it, we're like, okay, let's start bringing on guests. Let's get more serious about editing. Let's get more serious about the structure of the podcast. And then so we went from not even knowing if we're going to make a podcast to doing 15 episodes, finishing off a season. And now we're kind of like in the planning stages and beginning to record season 2. And so, that's just where we're at in terms of the pod.
Oh, that's very interesting to me to hear it talked about in terms of season. So then, And I have a couple questions on the podcast, just some of those decisions that you guys made in terms of how you edit and the structure. What kind of thought process went into that? Just for myself, I listen to probably an embarrassing amount of podcasts. I probably shouldn't even tell people how much podcasts I listen to in actuality. And you see that vast difference between the completely unedited, like just whatever it is, going out to those, Freakonomics and ones like that, the public service radio ones that are very highly edited, Clockwork, even sometimes they'll take people interviews and kind of consolidate what they say into, overtures. And your guys is kind of, it's not totally edited to that side, but it's not totally free form. How did you guys come to that balance of how much editing you wanted to put in? Because that was, a question I definitely came up in the earlier times of this podcast, and always my favorite podcasts were very unedited. So I went that way, but I also have podcasts that I enjoy on that side. So I'm just curious kind of what went into that decision-making process.
Great question. So I think like you, I enjoy a variety of podcasts as well. I'll enjoy the longer form conversations, like, Tim Ferriss or Dax Shepard stuff. Or I've heard some good stuff from Lex and Joe. And those guys are long form. Sometimes they're very spontaneous. Sometimes they go off on tangents. Right. Yeah. And then there's the flip side, which is the other podcasts that I enjoy are kind of like you go in with a topic in mind. Right. And you're going to get like a focus, like snippet and focused conversation. So like Planet Money, Freakonomics, that kind of deal. We kind of we had these conversations at the beginning being like, what do we want to do? And we kind of were like, what if we could just do a mix of both? So let's create a topic in mind first. Let's go topic first. Let's get guests that match with that topic. Right. And then let's try to have a pretty loose form fitting conversation. And then let's listen to the conversation after and let's say, what were the best parts? What were the highlights? Like what were the parts that were kind of brain dead or that those points didn't really make sense? Let's cut that out and let's just try to create something that, is just interesting and engaging. And, sometimes that ends up being 30 to 45 minutes. Sometimes we're like, nah, this content's too good. Like, let's go an hour and 20, let's go an hour and 30. Right. And so like the episode we did at the very end with Steven and Jason, that thing was 2 thick interviews, and we barely cut content from the interviews, because I'm like, these are good interviews. These are good insights. I'm enjoying what's happening. And so I think it's very fluid. To answer your question, we kind of just had a conversation between the two poles of like Freakonomics versus like Joe Rogan, and we're like, let's try to strike a balance in the middle.
Yeah, and that's what it seemed like to me. So in your guys' conversation and then in the interviews, is there lots of times more to it that gets cut out, and you're just taking, the creme of the creme of the conversations to fill that out, right? And that is something that I've, it's definitely kind of the big balance point to me in terms of editing, right? Like, to me, it's kind of two different things. You can have editing in terms of planned segments and that sort of thing, where I'm very curious about myself, because I don't know what the right answer, and I don't think anybody knows the right answer. I don't think there is a right answer to this, but for me, I see a lot of value, and this is a very long-term value because I don't think it'll pay dividends very early, in leaving some of those things in where you are a little bit brain dead and you do throw some misses, and you do, maybe misspeak or lose your train of thought. And I feel like what that builds on the long term is trust in you, that you're giving your authentic self, and you're willing to, show some of those strikeouts and show a little bit of where you're faulting, or where you're trying, the brain's firing and you're trying to find the right words for this topic. And you sometimes get there, you sometimes don't, but at least they know, and they start to learn your process, instead of just showing all the highs, kind of like an Instagram reel of all that. You show a little bit of those lows too, and you can show a little bit of times where you're not at your best, or maybe you misspeak, or maybe I hate 99% of the shit I say, right? And that's part of growing. And you hear that from a lot of people is, you just have to never be satisfied with it. But I still put it out because it's like, yes, I know this is what it is now, but I can see in the future what it's going to be. So was that at all crossing your guys' mind when you went into that? Did you ever think about leaving some more of that stuff in for that reason? Or was it just kind of, you wanted to make the best product as quickly as possible?
I think it was it depends if the conversation had value. So like, we always take a listen from like, okay, our listeners have X amount of time, right? And we have a lot of competition. So like, whether it's, Tim Ferriss, Brene Brown, Joe Rogan, whoever these, big hitters are, right? Or, VonDub, like more independent hitters, right? Yeah. Everyone has their rotate. I call it the rotation, right? Yeah, for sure. And your podcast rotation is also fitting into your life rotation. You might have music times, you might have, audiobook times, you might have Clubhouse times. Now that's a whole new thing, right? And so for us, it was like, we're happy to show vulnerability, but like, did that segment, was that interesting? Was that captivating? Like, sometimes we'll listen back to a conversation and we're like, dude, this is boring as fuck. Like, I wouldn't listen to this, right? And that's where it's less like, was this a mistake we made? Because sometimes we'll say the wrong thing, and I'll be like, and we'll correct each other, like on the pod, where like, I'll be like, Tony, I don't think that's a good take. Here's why. Or Tom, I don't think that's a good take, and here's why. We want that in, because we want to show where our discrepancies are, where our flaws are. What we don't want is like, we drone on about this topic and we're like listening back and we're like, this is not that interesting to our end user. Like, cause we think about it from the fact that like, we are the most interested in this podcast because we like have created it. Right. Yeah. And then we listen back with a more critical eye, being like, okay, what, this part, we didn't really have any insights. This is kind of basic shit. Like, this is not like adding anything to the conversation. Oh, but this part is gold, right? Yeah. Let's take this part. So that's the kind of the way that we do it. Again, I think, and you can probably speak to this as well, a podcast is not like a static entity, right? In the sense that you're always going to go back and you're always going to make, stylistic, you might have core values that are similar in terms of what kind of podcast you want to make, but you might make stylistic changes. So going into season 2, we might take more, do more of those stylistic changes to allow for more of that, raw, uncut content. I think just to add a little bit more to answer kind of why we took the season break, honestly, that it was just a practical our lives. Like I recently got a new job in AI, and I've been getting into this job and trying to learn. I moved back to Edmonton, so I'm now in my own apartment. I was living with my parents. And so all three of us kind of had like a life happen. Yeah. And so we were like, let's take a break from this podcast so we could kind of focus on life, and then let's regroup, strategize, and come back strong. And so that's kind of our thought process.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you have multiple people. Like for myself, I'm less constrained with that, because it's like, if I can find the little bit of time to make it happen, I'm only accountable to myself, right? And a big thing I've been trying to do is just, keep consistent content coming out once a week, right? Not miss a weekend. It sounds easier than it ends up being, right?
I respect the hell out of that, by the way.
Man,
the fact that you've been putting out content every week, it's amazing.
It's definitely not easy. I thought, I kind of in my head when I planned that out, and I'd always heard people talk about it, I figured that can't be that hard, right? You get some booked up, and then you have 4 in the can, and then all of a sudden you release 2 episodes in a week because you get excited, or because it's a little bit of non-evergreen content, a little bit current events, because I don't control where these conversations go. Sometimes it's very tailored to something that's happening right now, so I want to release those early, and then you're back up to that. Man, I got nothing after, release. Like, I released an episode this morning and now I have nothing to release next Monday. Right. And so I have this podcast booked, so that takes away that stress level. But there's weeks where you're rolling into the weekend knowing I need to find someone to podcast with this weekend, edit it and get it up by Monday. Right. And then that's giving my girlfriend and my sister, who listened to them before, a little bit of a chance to run through it. That one I did with Sodom Wall Street Bets. I mean, I did that Friday night and released it Friday night. I didn't have anybody listen to it. It was just kind of one of those, hopefully nothing bad was in it. Hopefully nothing, didn't get caught, but that's just kind of what it is. But it's been fun. It's been something, it was a dynamic that I never really put too much thought towards, of this weekly thing of trying to find that. It was almost like once you start it, you're going to be doing so much, it won't even be a big deal. And it was kind of a dynamic maybe I didn't put enough thought into beforehand.
How do you handle, I actually was fascinated by the logistics of that. Like, you record, you get you have like a quality assurance process of your girlfriend and your sister, and then you put out the content, eh? Like, do you ever have like, when your girlfriend or sister listen to it, is it like more like, hey, this conversation part wasn't that good? Or is it more like, hey, your audio is spotty? Like, what kind of feedback would you get there?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, mostly audio, like, oh, like Yelena's way quieter than you need to turn her up. Okay, right. Obviously, hey, you missed a bathroom break, you didn't cut it out, right? Like, it can hear you peeing halfway through. So shit like that, and that happens, and I cut that out. But then there's times where maybe I'll say something and it comes out, maybe they know me quite well and they know what I'm trying to say, right? And sometimes how it comes out doesn't exactly match my intention, and sometimes they just warn me, just like, hey, you said this, it kind of comes off this way. If somebody doesn't know you, if they're just listening, you might be, and then I have to make that judgment call. Like, is that something I want to leave in? Usually if it's me saying something, I live by the sword, die by the sword. People want to come after me. At this point, when I started doing the podcast, I decided, I know who I am, and I know I'm a good person, and a really genuinely good person. I love everybody. I'd never want to cause harm. I would never say something that's trying to hurt anybody or hurt anybody's feelings. So having that knowledge, I can kind of lean on that a little bit and say, I'm going to understand that this is not, even though it can be taken that way, I know I didn't mean it that way. And therefore I'm going to stand by it, not cut it out, put it in, let people take that upon themselves and understand, because I also think that is what's building that up, of that trust of, hey, I'm going to put myself out there and you guys are going to get a lot of me. Sometimes it's not going to be great, right? I'm not a perfect person all the time, and sometimes that's going to happen. So there's definitely those small types of things every once in a while that comes out, and more so it's just to be like, is this half decent? Because like I said, I don't usually like anything. Usually I know after an interview, right after it, I have those feelings of my first instinct. Was that good? Was that bad? And I can kind of tell. And then regardless of that instinct, give it, an hour or a day, I'm already questioning it. Even if it was like, I love that one, I'll think back to a couple things I said, and I'm just automatically into that spiral of, oh, it's not good enough. I need to be better. How did you forget that word? Right. Like I feel like I love my mind so much, and I love the ideas that come out of it. I just hate this mouth and how it garbles it all coming out, and it usually doesn't come out the right way. But that's a skill in itself, right? And you see these people like Joe Rogan, who's had, 12 years, well, with his comedy, even decades and decades to practice that skill of how do you articulate your ideas, right? That communication skill is so important. And I'm working on it every day. The more times I can get on here and, do good or bad, win or fail, I'm still getting better. I'm still learning. Right. And that is, to me, I treat it like a stand-up comic. They always talk about when a stand-up comic starts, it's just stage time, right? Wherever you can get up, if it's at some Chinese food restaurant or, you know, at a karaoke night, if it's at a poetry reading, you just need to get up and you need to practice. It's all about that time on stage, right? So that's me. This is my time on mic. And now I'm trying to think of other spin-off things. Like I really want to get into streaming video games because I see that as a very similar thing of, right, you're still trying to entertain an audience, you're trying to bring things forward, you're trying to convey what you want, you're trying to be entertaining, right? So like things like that where it's not maybe exactly specific to your 10,000 hours that you can put in, but maybe it's, you know, slightly applicable. Ooh, those words are tough sometimes. So that's kind of
no, I totally get it. And a lot of these skills are crossover skills. Like, for example, from the podcast, I don't know about you, but like from the podcast, I would listen back and be like, in earlier episodes, especially, I speak way too fast. I take way too many breaths. I need to calm down.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's no rush for me to get my words out. And that was something I didn't even know that I did until the podcast, or obviously the likes, you know, beginning of the podcast, at the end of the podcast, because I listen to and edit a lot of our podcasts, and I posted in our group chat, like, guys, we should be proud. The product that we're putting out, you know, episode 15, there is barely any barely any likes. We're a lot more comfortable on the mics. We're more comfortable around each other. And again, like you said, man, that's just a product of putting yourself out there. And comedy is a great example of that, because comedy is such a dynamic art form, right? Because, you know, you're not only putting content with podcasts, you're putting content out, and then somebody's going to listen to it at some point, and you're hoping that they resonate, and you're kind of waiting on Instagram comments or whatever to see, like, how is the audience going to resonate with this? Comedy, you see that right in front of you, right? Yeah. And you have to react, which is why, like, a guy that both of us love, Andrew Schulz, is amazing, because he's the king of, like, going into the audience, and his audience. Oh, you're right. You're rocking it. Yeah. His audience game is hilarious. Like, the craziest thing is, so I think it's because he's good friends with Akash Singh, right? Like, I've seen him do audience stuff with, like, members of different ethnicities, and I remember being like, dude, you're like educated as hell. Like this joke is hilarious because of the specificity, and I respect that, you know?
Yeah. And it allows people, especially with Schultz, it allows people to give him a little bit more rope. He always talks about this, right? Like in his crowd work special he put out, I think there was a Sikh guy, and he had, I can't remember what they're called. It's like a historical, almost armband shield thing. And he knew the name. Yeah. Said it, and then he made some jokes, but because he had shown, hey, I know a little bit about your culture, now I can make these jokes, and they're funny and they're specific, like you say. But him growing up in New York, in Manhattan, his whole life, and doing comedy since he's a young guy, he has all these different crowd interactions. He has, you know, people from all over the world, and he knows all these he picks up on their cultures this little bit at a time. And now he has this arsenal of weaponry. It doesn't matter. He can go to crowd work and say, where are you from? And you can pill out the smallest little place. Okay, he's already got some jokes lined up in his head of where he can take this, right? And he's just a master of it. And you see that. But again, that all comes with stage time. You know, the reason he's so good at it is because he's been on stage for tens of thousands of hours, having those little interactions with all these people from every different little part of the world, so that he has that repertoire at his disposal. In the moment, it seems like he's just pulling it out and he's just this genius, right? But he knows that he has, you know, 15 years.
He's put in the work.
Yeah, he's put in the work.
And that's the thing. That's the thing. That's what separates the goods from the greats, is just, you know, putting in the work, putting in the time. And like with him, like you said, like I remember messaging like my friend and being like, yo, who told him all the secrets? Like, who told him this shit? Like, I'm like, it was too good. Yes, this intel is top secret. How does he know all this? I was freaking out. But no, exactly, man. Exactly.
Man, I went and saw him when he was when he came to Edmonton, and he put it out. I'm on like his mailing group and all this stuff, so I see he's supposed to come and play the Jubilee Auditorium, but I cannot find it anywhere. Right, like Jubilee Auditorium, Andrew Schultz, comedian. It's not coming up. And then I see. I talked to Brennan, who runs the SU, and he does all the stuff at the Horowitz. And I said, have you heard anything about Andrew Schultz? Because they had put the notes up, hey, he's at the Jubilee Auditorium, and then they took it down right away. But I was thinking like, oh, is it still happening? And Brennan goes, no, he's coming to the Meyer Horowitz. Like, do you want tickets? And I was like, no, I'm such a big fan. Like, keep your tickets. I'm going to buy tickets. Like, I bought 4 tickets right there. Didn't know who I was going with, but I just wanted to, I love him so much. It was like, I don't even want free tickets. I want to support him to make sure this is as sold out as possible. He makes as much money as possible, because like that type of art. And I was so not disappointed with that. I brought some people, and it was the funniest show, man.
Yeah.
Like, we were all dying, like every single one of us, the whole crowd, just like, it's next level. Like the things that these comedians are doing these days, like the levels they're hitting, the amount of, like, they used to talk about, like a comedian killing, right? And there was kind of that level for it. I think it's just going up in levels. And I think this is happening everywhere. I think just with technology, I think you're seeing, like, what are the odds that the three best tennis players we've almost ever seen in the world are all playing right now? What are the odds that we have a Tom Brady versus a Patrick Mahomes? What is the odds that Connor McDavid is absolutely changing the hockey like we've never seen? Every sport is because we've had so much of a ramp in technology and understanding and nutrition, all this, every area, that elite level is being risen up, right? And that's same with comedy. And I feel like it's just, what I love is people chasing greatness, whatever that greatness is, right? If that's comedy, if that's sports, whatever that is, that podcasting, I want you to want to be great, right? And if I can jump into that journey, because I want to be great and I want people around me that want to be great. I want to surround myself with people. This is why I love Andrew Schultz. On one of the episodes when I first found him, right, and went through his whole catalog and listened to everything he's ever put out, it was a conversation he had about being the GOAT. And he was talking about wanting to be the GOAT, and that, Chappelle's the GOAT right now, but if you want to go for that, you have to talk about it. You have to say, like, I'm not in here just to, be a good comedian. I want to be the GOAT. I'm coming for you, Chappelle. Like, that's what it is. And I love that. And it was like, with podcasting, hey, Joe Rogan's the GOAT, but fuck, I'm coming, like, that is the mindset I want to have in that
mentality.
Yeah. Like, I think everybody has to have that. I think, and he's talking about, like, anything that is at the peak has always thought of itself as the GOAT, right? Like, not even in that sense, like a cheetah on the Serengeti, like, they think they're the fastest thing. Like, they have that, they don't ever question that. Like, I am the fastest thing. They have to have that for them to survive, to be that. You have to have that. It doesn't mean they're the fastest thing. There could be something on the other side of the world that is, but in their head, in their little world of what can affect them, they are the best. And they think of it that way, right? And it doesn't matter what is happening on the other side of the world, right? Or as long as it's outside of your scope of impact, you just have to be the one. You have to want to be the best. And I just loved him being okay with talking about that and just showing, that side of it. I think that's so powerful.
That's the interesting thing that you said there. Like, the principles that you talked about, striving for greatness, putting in the work, discipline, putting in the hours, honing your craft, those are universal principles across fields, right? Yeah. And I think that's why, funny enough, I'm kind of going back to this, The Last Dance. I think that's one of the reasons why that documentary was so popular. It's not that we have hundreds of millions or tens of millions of basketball fans, because there's a lot of people who are maybe casual basketball fans or don't even know, but we'll watch that and we'll be like, holy shit, the competitive drive, the attitude, the ways, like, like the way, Michael, the whole, I took that personally meme, like that's hilarious. But what that's digging into is like finding external sources of motivation to continually fuel the fire. Right. Yeah. And that documentary, man, like I'm a huge hoops head. And so when I watched that documentary and I just understood all the underlying psychology, the team dynamics, the leadership styles of Mike, and like how he led versus, maybe how others would lead. Fascinating.
And to see all those other personalities that are huge in their own right? Like the
like Dennis
Rodman of the world, and to watch them and just to see that they understand that, right? And for them to check their ego for anybody in the world is a tough thing to do, but it's Mike, and just to see that, and to see, we have this almost this other instinct of like recognizing that in people, that whatever that goatness is that Michael Jordan have, everybody respects that, right? Dennis Rodman respects that. All these people respect that. You look at Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay and turn that team around like that. It's something. It's something that's hard to describe, but everybody recognizes it. We have this internal radar for that thing of that greatness, right? When you get around it and you can see it and you can feel it. And I feel like that is so much, I think people have that in different amounts. And I feel like there's a lot of people that have tried to put a name on it. And I feel like I've myself put a name on it a couple of times. Actually, in the episode that released today, I kind of pitched it to Yelena in a weird way. Have you ever watched the show Survivor?
I've seen like snippets, but I haven't really dig into it.
So Survivor, you go out there and it requires a lot of different skills. Like, it's a physical game because you have to survive, right? It's mental. You have to know how to read people because there's also voting out, and it's an intelligence that goes past just your IQ. It's about how you read people, how sure you are of yourself, how intelligent you are, clearly, like that all rolls into it. And it's about this. It doesn't have a name. I called it Survivor IQ, right? Like it's something that goes into, it's like a dynamic of your pure capability, right? And I feel like that's what at work, that's always what I'm looking for, right? Like instead of pure skills and stuff, it's like, are you capable? If you can't figure this out, are you going to be able to Google it, learn it really quickly and then figure it out, right? Like it's those capable people. And I feel like that is almost what is the base idea that all that GOAT stuff is built off of, right? I feel like that is what the Michael Jordans have. And then they just have the will to keep applying that and just know that in any situation, as long as I have all the inputs, when it goes into my mind, I'm going to find the best decision possible, right? If maybe that's more of a business thing, it's on the court, whatever the inputs of the dynamics or wherever that ball goes, whatever defense they throw at me, I'm the best person for this. Get me the ball. I will figure this out, right? Or in a work setting, I'm so again, this sounds terrible, but I'm so confident in myself in my decision-making. And maybe this is less my confidence and more my inability to trust others with things. It's get me all the inputs, right? If we're making a big business decision, give me all the inputs. How much is it going to cost? What are we going to get out of it? Let's think of all the pros, all the cons we can with a big group of people. And once I have that, I'm very confident that the decision I make is going to be the best one. And I don't have to second guess it at all. The only thing I'm worried about is not having all the inputs, right? And personally for work, how I try to bring that forward is to get everybody okay with saying, I don't know, with, trying to find certain ways that you can have discussions where you understand if somebody doesn't understand it enough to make a decision, right? Like I feel like so many times we get into meetings and you'll talk about something and you can see it in people's eyes. They're saying, yeah, I get it, but you can see in their eyes, they don't get it. And until everybody's on the right page, everybody's bringing it in, you can't have a vote on something, right? If you're trying to make sure that everybody understands all the inputs that we can make this big decision and people are, just voting one way because they see somebody else in the room is doing it and they're not actually engaged in it. I feel like that skill of being able to read that and understand that and know when people are rowing the same way and aren't I don't know, I'm kind of going off on a tangent where I don't know how to draw it all back together, but it all is different layers of the same thing, right? And I feel like that is such a important skill to develop. And I think you develop it through these conversations, through podcasting, through these things. It's something that develops. It's almost that saying to know the way, broadly. It's in the Book of Five Rings that Joe Rogan always talks about, but it's about that Miyamoto Musashi, how he got so good at sword fighting and calligraphy and all this stuff that in chasing that greatness, like you said, it's applicable to all these things. Once you've chased greatness, once you become, the best basketball player in the entire world, you know how to chase greatness, and now you can just apply it to other things, right? If you can really dive in and try and be the best at one thing, you will now eventually come into all these other things and have a base built up so that you can go in and immediately show impact and bring things forward. It's hard to put words to it, but it's almost an idea. I feel like over the next 100 podcasts or so, I'm going to slowly just add little pieces to it, like this big paper mache idea of what I'm trying to express to people, but I'm just not there yet.
Right. No, but I based off the attributes that you described, like, the ability to understand whether or not there's actual understanding within the wider collective, or whether or not it's very face level understanding, the ability to make decisions based off a variety of inputs, the ability to adapt to different circumstances, the ability to thrive in the face of adversity, and also the ability to take those things in one context and apply to another, right? Like these are all kind of the core competencies that we see in the highest performers. And funny enough, what you said actually resonated at the very end with me because, I was thinking about, so I grew up on being a huge Kobe fan, RIP. One thing that impressed me about him was the fact that once basketball was done, he just shifted completely. He was like in writing, he was like, winning Oscars, producing, he was like focused on, producing. He was like, doing all these things. And I remember I listened to an interview with him, close to, towards the end right before he died. And one of the things he said was, you apply the same principles, right? You apply the same level of focus, you apply the same inquisitiveness, you apply the same curiosity. Because if you listen to Kobe documentaries, the most fascinating thing about this guy is like, even when he was playing, he was just curious about creativity and leadership, and he would just cold call actors, directors. Like he cold called Tarantino, and he's like, yo, in Kill Bill, like, why did you make this decision? Why did you make that decision? And he would find a way to take those attributes in different fields and apply it in a way that made sense to him, right?
Yeah.
And I always found that fascinating, and I really took from that, because I was like, yo, you know, Ankur, like whatever field you're in, that may change, right? Instead of like looking for just, you know, people in your field with them, which is valuable as well. Like there's nothing knocking that, but you know, look for people who have done things that you think are exceptional and try to figure out what makes them tick. Like what are that maybe the habits that they have? What are maybe the ways that what's the perspective that they approach life, right? And maybe there's something that you can take from that and apply to your core principles or your worldview or your habits, whatever that is, right? And so that's one thing I loved about Kobe. And that's one thing that I've loved about, you know, some of the best performers, right? They're just able to kind of learn, right, from what's around them, whether it's people or books or whatever, and then apply it to their life.
Right. And I think that's so true. I think that's a great example, especially Kobe, because like you said, he realized, I think that is true, where if you pursue greatness in anything, you'll learn the principles to apply it to anything. But there's some things that are more and less directly applicable to life. And I think, you know, like basketball, that was up to Kobe to find ways to learn while he was pursuing greatness in that. Okay, these lessons I'm learning, how can I now apply them in other areas? So he was so ready when he did make that switch that he had already learned as he's pursuing greatness in this one thing and learning all these attributes that what makes you great at this. He was constantly fact checking that against other areas and seeing, okay, now how does it apply other ways, which is completely on him, right? Like if he wanted to, he could have completely put his blinders on, figured out basketball, and he would still be able to apply those principles. He still learned all those principles, but he did the work to find how to widely apply them, right? And I think there's also something to be said about what you're chasing perfection in, right? Like if you want to be the best in something, choose something that is going to be applicable, unless it's something that is just a calling, right? Like maybe you want to be the best swimmer in the world and that is your calling. You're going to have to find ways to make that applicable, just like basketball, right? But I think something like podcasting, where it's conversation, that is already applicable to your entire life, right? Whatever job you get in, you're going to have conversations, right? I think there's something to be said about chasing perfection in areas that are already applicable, where you don't need to do a bunch of work to find ways that they're going to be applicable. Yeah. Oh, that word is just giving me
that's a tongue twister, eh?
No, man, applicable is just not my word today. But you know, I see that when I started this podcast, you could see at work, the conversations I was having at work were so different so quickly, and we're, you know, evolving, and you're able to take some of these skills that you learn in having a conversation here and how to, you know, manage people's egos and bring that forward. Right. And I think I had learned a lot of that at work that I was able to bring into the podcast. And then it's a feedback loop where I'm learning things on the podcast that I'm bringing to work. I'm learning things at work that I'm bringing to the podcast, and you're automatically leveling up, right? Like one of those things where, you know, it's hard to be the best reader in the world, but if you could pursue greatness in reading, you're going to read all the time, right? It's just like you have to find things like speaking and reading and these things that you're going to use all the time, and find ways to level yourself up in those, because now you're going to find it everywhere, right? And you're going to see those things that make you great in one, you're going to be able to transfer to other things, right? It's very interesting to me on that level of just what is going to make you great, and what, looking around at other people like Kobe, like Michael Jordan, saying, you know, what made them great? What can I steal? What can I, you know, put into my toolbox? Because there's going to be some tools that they have that are so detrimental if you're not on that same goal, right? Like I think me and you both watched The Last Dance. I'm sure there's some things that we're not going to steal from Michael Jordan, because it's just different areas. It's just not applicable, right? But it's about learning what pieces can I take, because I'm not going to go in and, you know, treat my employees like Michael Jordan treated his teammates. That's not going to happen, right? I don't think that would go over well. It's just not the time and place.
That's the gray. That's the nuance, right? Like I think a lot of people will look at figures and they'll focus on, you know, perhaps the most negative attribute of said figure, right? Michael Jordan, egomaniacal, selfish leader, right? Or like, you know, whatever that is, right? And what you have to take a look at is like, well, hey, you know, let's look at the shades of gray. Extremely strong work ethic, you know, ability to motivate, right? Maybe kind of a dick. Do you want to be able to motivate without being kind of a dick? Well, there's ways to do that, right? Well, how do you do that, right? And what's best suited to your personality types? What's best suited to your leadership style, right? Like that's a fluid process, right?
Right.
You know, comparing, you know, a lot of people, for example, I'm a huge LeBron fan as well. A lot of people will look at LeBron and be like, oh, well, LeBron doesn't have the killer instinct. I'm like, oh, LeBron's a different guy, man. Like, you know, I was reading a book about, you know, LeBron's leadership style, and his is very communal, team first, right? So he's like, everyone's on the same group chat text. Everyone comes to the team dinners. Like everyone's invited to the team dinners, whether or not they come, it's on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy. I just want to make sure everyone's having a good time. I just want to make sure the whole team is kind of jiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be in contrast to Mike, where he's like, I'm going to kick your ass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you better get on the wagon, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, you know what I mean? And they're two contrasting styles. Both can lead to success, but it just depends on who that person is, right?
Right. And who the people are around them. And, you know, I mean, I think the best leaders are those people that can do both, right? If they recognize that this team, the inputs that they have, if success is going to require that Michael Jordan-ness, that, you know, getting everybody up, working so hard that you've dragged people kicking and screaming along with you, right? Or do you need that LeBron of, okay, bringing everyone together? I mean, it's funny to me how many of the last 2 decades of Stanley Cup winners, you look at the teams, and one of the biggest factors that, you know, you can look at, what are the factors that had? Was it good goaltending? Was it a good decor, right? Is it that one game-breaking forward that really makes a NHL team successful? Well, what it seems to be is, okay, which teams liked each other the best? Which ones were out partying hard? Which ones had the best glue? Which one had the best team dynamic? That seems to be the one factor that wins it out. But then, as a multi-million-dollar, almost billion-dollar franchise for some of these, how do you build that? You know, like how much weight do you put on that to build up that dynamic? Because clearly, if it's that easy, people would be figuring out, right? They'd be putting things in place. I've argued this for a while of just, I think every NHL team, and from that, you can almost propagate this to all the other sports too, is to have just somebody on your staff whose number one goal is just to, you know, book, you know, club rooms, bottle service, everything for these guys, you know, just be a solver, make sure that they have as much fun bringing them together, creating events that they're always together. You're building that camaraderie, you know, building or bridging,
they're building
gaps.
the bonding. They're building the bonding, right? And and that's the key. That's the key. Like I remember there's two, like, you know, that bonding is different for, you know, A, the bonding is extremely important. And B, the thing that you said that was interesting was different people require different tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remembered, I'm referencing Kobe again just because I know all these stories, but like I remember his story where he was talking about, he's like, some teammates, they wanted to party. So I was like, all right, I'll come party with you. Let's go. If I party with you, you're coming up and waking up at 5 a.m. with me to get shots up. And they're like, all right, I'm done. I'll do it. Right. And then other teammates, he had to take like a harder tactic, like Pau Gasol, who's one of his teammates from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just beat Spain in the gold medal game, right? So the United States beat Spain in the gold medal game in 2008. Mm-hmm. Kobe had just lost to the Celtics in 2008 as well. Whole team was kind of mad. So Kobe, to fire Pau Gasol up, you know, before Pau comes in, he hangs his gold medal in Pau Gasol's locker, right? And Pau comes in fucking pissed, like, "What? You're such a dick. What the heck?" Right? And then he's like, "Pau, you were soft against Boston. You were soft against us. You better not be soft this year, otherwise we're not winning." And Pau had like a career year. He was phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
And afterwards, Pau told him, he's like, "Yeah, you motivated me. You got me into the right headspace." And that, I mean, again, leaders are not always going to get that right, but like as you improve as a leader, you're able to recognize what each person needs. And that is huge.
Mm-hmm. And I think also you're building the trust in yourself that is the right call, because that could have backfired on Kobe, right? Like that could have, you know, created a rift that they weren't able to bridge, and could have, you know, caused disruption within the team and could have went the other way, right? So Kobe had to have enough belief in himself that, hey, I trust myself enough to read this player and understand that this is what he needs, and it paid off, right? And he did great, but it could have went the other way. And I think that's where that is developed in these players, and it takes them a couple of years to not only realize or build up those skills of reading everybody and what they need, but then also to take those swings, because sometimes those leadership swings are, you know, could go one way, could go the other. And I think it's a lot to be said about their willingness to take those swings in and of itself, other than the reaction that it had, right? I just think that's where you see that is real leadership to me, whereas, you know, Kobe has that, but he can do all these other things. That's what I love. You know, it's just not one thing. This is how I lead everybody, get on board, right? That works. Michael Jordan proved that works, right? Like, you know, and LeBron's kind of got his way, and he's proved it works. Maybe not as consistently, I guess you could say, as Jordan, right? Just with their finals appearances, but I don't know. To me, I just love that when people can do multiple ways, and they can be stern, but they can be soft, right? To know what does this person require, and to be able to do that. I feel like that to me is so much more admirable than however great you are at this one style, right? That flexibility and that because I think it has a piece of, I think what to me separates those two out is compassion. And I love compassion. That's why I love Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan, because I feel like that there are two of those people that always lead with compassion, or always bringing that forward. I feel like leadership without compassion can work, but I always prefer to have that compassion, right? And now everybody's built in, everyone's part of this team, everyone understands it, and you're not just forcing people along kicking and screaming like we saw in The Last Dance, right? Like that was, his mindset of, hey, I'm going to work so fucking hard. If you guys don't jump in and get on my level, you're going to get left behind, or you're going to get traded, right? And that obviously raised everybody up to a level that to that point had never been seen before, right? And I think that is what also gives it a little bit of extra special, like now when Kobe's doing those things to motivate guys, he's following the path that Jordan had set before him, right? And Kobe's one of those guys where he was talking to Jordan and learning these things from him and picking that up. But when Jordan was doing it, that was all new, right? Like these were some of these tactics we had never seen before, and the results were never seen before too. So it makes sense. But I think that also takes another level to be the first person to do these types of things, right? And I feel like that is where we're seeing it in hockey right now. There's one podcast that is changing the entire dynamic. Spitting Chicklets under the bar.
Spitting Chicklets. Yeah.
It's showing this whole new way. It's trailblazing this whole new way for NHL players to operate. For a long time, every interview we saw with a hockey player, get pucks deep, we work hard, defend hard, attack hard, and you'd hear nothing. It would be the same 6 lines, just reiterated over the top, no personality. It was don't get in trouble, and hockey was boring because of it. And now you see one disruption to the field, and you see these people have huge success off showing a little bit more personality, and now there's this whole new route of people trying out these new things, but it was never seen.
100%.
And all it takes is for one disruptor to go in there and show something new.
And the two things that I got to say, one, a lot of that is, based off the personality as well. Like, I don't know. Do you know Cabby Richards, Cabral Richards? Yeah, he used to be on the Score. I love Cabby, man. Yeah. His interviews were hilarious. Like he had these interviews with Kobe that were hilarious. He had these interviews with hockey players like Sidney Crosby and stuff. Sure. Like he just kept talking about their knobs. He's like, so how do you package your knob? And then he was like talking about the sticks and shit. And it was amazing because he always kind of got them on like a loose kind of vibe. It was always hilarious. And I think one thing I've noticed, is like interviewing has changed because podcasting, Clubhouse, a lot of these things have gotten rid of intermediaries, right? And they've gone direct to source. And, sometimes, like in the basketball world, I know, for example, a lot of, former players just make their own podcast, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get the insights about like, what is club culture like? What is drug culture like? All the things that they may be hesitant to open up to a traditional media platform for, largely because, and I guess this is a challenge with media now, is because, media has this, advertising driven model. They have to like drive views. So they're going to have to sensationalize things. They're going to have to quote things out of context. They have like a 5-minute readership versus like a 45-minute readership. And so they're scared of being like, okay, like what I say, will it be represented accurately? Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And so with a podcast, at least you have, the ability to articulate a thought process, through the whole thought process. So whoever listens to it can be like, oh, I get what you were trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Even if I disagree with it, right? At least I understand what you're trying to do. And it doesn't seem like, what is this crazy athlete out there doing? He's lost his mind, right? Where a lot of times, no, like there was reasons, right? They may not be the best reasons, but at least there's some logic behind it. It doesn't seem like they're just absolutely out of touch with reality, which is how that sensationalization brings everything to, right? Like when you treat everything in those little 5-minute clips, that's what it paints these guys as, is they're just crazy. They're out there wilding out and just being wild. And no, in reality, there's more to it. Like it might've been a bit wild, but they were thinking of it this way. There was this person there. And I feel like that's flagrant too. Akash and Andrew's podcast. I was not a big basketball fan. I mean, I would watch the finals, I'd watch some games, but then to hear them talk, especially on their Patreon, where they don't care because they got buddies in the NBA and they'll tell all the behind the scenes dirt, right? Like when the bubble was going on, they were talking mad shit about what was going on, who was with who, and all this stuff, right? Like, I love it. And it was amazing to me, right? Like as a kind of peripheral fan to get that in-depth look. Now I love basketball, right? And also I think I've said this a million times on the podcast, having Fraser and Chase explain to me the last 5 minutes of a game, like changed 100% how I enjoy basketball, right? And it was just that small little bit of information that I was making a game boring from it. Well, what are they doing at the end here? It just seems boring, like why they're fouling and all this stuff. Like as soon as they explained that to me, it's like, oh, I get this game so much better. And then what took it to that next level was, flagrant 2, seeing all these behind the scenes shit. Now I'm invested, right? As a fan, I love the storyline, which is why I love MMA so much, because every once in a while in football or basketball or hockey, there's a good storyline, right? There's a Battle of Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton. There's some heat there. With MMA, there's a beautiful story. There's 2 beautiful, amazing stories every time on a fight card of 10 fights. That is, 20 amazing stories. It's just about how much work have you done to learn about them, right? Like on a card like this weekend, the main event, I was all in because I've watched these guys. I've grown with these guys. I know their families. I know their kids. I know what kind of people they are, right? On an in-depth level from these podcasts and these kind of types of things, right? And then the co-main and then down here, it took almost to 8 fights deep before I didn't know the people very in depth and have a real attachment to them, right? So that is a whole different experience to me as a fan, to somebody that's casual watching that kind of sport. That is a completely different sport we're watching right there, where I'm emotionally invested in these guys, right? Where now, because of that, these last 5-6 years, MMA has, first it overtook basketball, then it overtook football. Now it's kind of hockey's up here in MMA. And, lately I'm watching more MMA than I'm watching that because of those storylines, because of what they are and what becomes with it. Like it's just so, but it's hard to explain that to people, right? Like that's almost 6 years of homework I did to build up my knowledge base to be where I can enjoy it that much. Right. And I feel like people that are not sports fans laugh at sports fans in a way where they just think they're wasting their time, but they're so out of touch with the amount you can get out of it by fully understanding a sport and getting in depth with it, right? Like probably like how you enjoy basketball, to try and explain that to just not even a fan that isn't a fan of basketball, but not a fan of sports in general. That'd be very hard for you to explain exactly what you are getting out of that and all the different levels of entertainment that is, because it's not just watching people put basketballs in a hoop. It's the storylines and what they did to get here and following their careers. There's so much more that goes into it that they're so ignorant of, right?
100%. Yeah. Let's keep going. I just got to pee real quick.
Yeah, of course. Me too.
Let me just take a quick break and we'll come back.
10-4.
Okay, good to go.
10-4. Yeah. So I think I realized why I couldn't talk in the first half. I didn't take my alpha brain today. What was I thinking? That's the first podcast I'm taking without it. And I was talking like I had mothballs in my head. So maybe if this second half of the podcast turns around and I'm just on fire and my words are coming out beautifully, now we'll know that's about the best commercial they can give for it. And I might have to start getting a sponsorship going here. We'll see.
From Alpha Brain, eh? Yeah,
exactly. So I've already forgotten what we were talking about before. I think it was a little bit of basketball, a little bit of stuff, but something that has come up a couple times on here, Clubhouse, which is a new app. Maybe can you just explain to people kind of what what Clubhouse is and how it started and kind of where it's going and why you enjoy it so much?
Sure. So Clubhouse is a voice-first platform in the sense that there's no video. The way that you interact with people is through your voice. It's a new social network that was released in 2020. And the way that I would describe it is kind of like, a group phone call, a podcast, and a Zoom webinar had a baby. So, like you go into Clubhouse, you join, first of all, it's only invite only. So somebody has to invite you, and they do that as a way to try to, make sure that people are inviting are legit, right? You get into there and you can join channels. And on these channels, you can hear people talking. You can't see themselves, but you can hear people talking about, specific topics, or you can join in as a speaker into the conversations, right? And you can also host your own rooms and just invite people and what have you. Now, I'll tell you what I like and dislike, because I think, first of all, overall, I do like the platform because, there's a lot of things that I found on the platform to be really cool. Number one, so far in the conversations that have been on the platform, I found people to be more nuanced, more thoughtful, more willing to engage in like long form conversations. A great example is I listened to a really, really interesting chat about Section 230, which is the section in the United States Communications Act that says, platform companies cannot face liability for what their users say, right? It's a very contentious issue in the United States, very fascinating tech policy discussion. I listen in. They have the founders of this bill from way back in 96. They have the Republican lawmakers, Democrat lawmakers. They have other tech policy experts. Nobody's arguing, nobody's yelling. It's like a long form, nuanced conversation about this. And I was like, love that.
Yeah.
I love that you can't see anyone, because frankly, this means that you can do chores while you're listening in. You can do other things while you're listening in, and you're not making judgment calls based off, verbal expressions. You're kind of just able to only react to people. I also love the fact that, for me, I've just been hosting rooms and inviting random friends from different parts of my life. Like a thing that I'll say is like, there's a lot of things I'm trash at, but there's two things that I think I'm good at. One of them is I would say I'm a very solid networker. Like I have a very wide, and I don't mean that in like a superficial, like I just love meeting people, connecting with people. And I have a very wide network, and I love, before COVID, I loved hosting parties and having friends from different areas just connect with each other, right? Yeah. And I've kind of been able to replicate that through Clubhouse. Like I've been hosting these like Clubhouse chats, 10, 15 friends. But you're in Vancouver, you're in Victoria, you two should connect. And then just like moderating these discussions. It almost feels like I'm hosting like a podcast with like 10 to 15 people, and it's spontaneous and it's banter filled. So that's great. What I dislike, and I can get into that, and I think there's a couple things. One of them is I think it's just such a new platform that it's difficult to always find good content, right? Like the algorithm, I guess, or maybe it doesn't know me well enough. Maybe I haven't followed enough things, but I'll be like looking for content for a long time, and I'll be like, I don't know if I'm feeling this, which is part of the reason why I started creating my own rooms, because I was like, I just kind of want to talk to my friends. The other thing is, sometimes it's like, and I don't know if they should change this. It's just like a frustration for me. Like I will be in a room and I'll be like trying to like, I want to comment on what's happening in the room. So like, for example, I was in this dating room this one time, and these people are telling like their wildest dating stories and like these crazy stories about like, some dude was talking about this threesome he was on. Some dude was talking about getting dumped on Valentine's Day, and me and my friend are listening in, laughing, and we're like trying to comment, but we had to like go to another platform to have these kind of side conversations, right? And I think the reason they did that was because they wanted to make it only a voice platform. And like I've had other situations where like, I'll meet these great people and a network, like, hey, we should connect. And so we have to connect through a different social media network because, they don't have an easy way for me to just send a message, right? So again, and then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll let you go here is, it's only iPhones right now, which, yeah, it's only iPhones. Only iPhones can join. And, I think like, it's unfortunate because I think the reason they're doing that is because they're trying to keep it small. They're trying to test it out. It's still kind of in its beta stage, but it's unfortunate because I have all these friends who are on Android, and I'm just like, yo, come through my club chat. Let's go. Right. Yeah. And they're like, oh, bro, we can't, like, we don't have iPhone. Right. And so those are some of the, exactly. That's what I've told them. And look, some of the gripes at the end of the day, man, like one of the reasons I'm so excited about this, and I'm sure as somebody in the podcasting community, you've heard about this, is like, we're not going direct to source. Like, when Robinhood happens, Elon goes on Clubhouse and interviews Vlad, right? Yeah. When something else happens, you can just you don't even have to get like other stakeholders. You can just get the people in the room who are at these companies and discussing it with each other. And you can listen in on their discussions. And sometimes in certain rooms, you can join in. And sometimes the craziest thing for me has been like, when I'll say perspectives and like people from like California or Australia will be like, I resonate with this, and let's be friends. And we feel like we know each other so deep because we've spent like I've had friends that I made on Clubhouse where I've just spent like hours discussing philosophy, politics. And that's sorry, I'm rambling, but there's another thing about Clubhouse that's amazing is like, there's not a permanent record of what you say. So when you go on there, so let's say Nick, you and I make like a VonDub chat. Yeah. Let's say hypothetically we recorded this podcast on VonDub, right? Or like we just had some sort of conversation on Clubhouse, right? And we invited some people. We could have a really deep, nuanced conversation, and none of it, unless somebody external records it, which is illegal, none of it is recorded. And what I found is both myself and other people on the app have just been really vulnerable from like day one. Like I've gone into a room full of strangers and talked about like issues of racism or issues of just like mental health or other topics that, would probably take me a while to open up to my close friends about.
Yeah.
But because I'm in this room and I'm in this environment where, this is not a permanent record. You can't go back to my Twitter and read this.
Mm-hmm.
I felt more comfortable. And likewise, I've seen people feel more comfortable. So that's kind of why I've liked Clubhouse. I think it's an imperfect platform, but for the ambition of what it's trying to do, I find it fascinating.
Oh yeah. No, it's something that I've just recently kind of hopped onto. I just maybe last week or something got an invite. I've heard, it was that's what it was when Elon and Vlad were going on to discuss Robinhood. I was like, oh man, I'd love to listen to that. So I try and download this Clubhouse app and you need an invitation. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. We'll see. So I just kind of put my name in there and didn't expect nothing of it. And then maybe next morning I had somebody had added me in. So joined a couple rooms, and it is very interesting. You hear some cool conversations. I like what you said about it being more nuanced, about it not being permanently recorded, allowing people to open up a little bit more. I do see a lot of the benefit in that. My biggest gripe, and again, this is going to be very specific to me and just pretty much my little bitch, and I don't think it's a change that they need to make. For me, I take in so much content that if there's a platform that allows me to only listen to it at one time speed, I struggle. Because I just, I'm so used to listening to 2.5, 3 times speed, taking in things, getting to the next one. If I'm going to sit and listen to a 2-hour conversation, it has to be pretty good. And what I'm finding is I hop into this room that has Lex Friedman, Eric Weinstein, Brian Keating, like all these physics minds that I absolutely love and I want to hear from. And then Turquoise hops in and talks about, aliens, and I love talking aliens too. So this is kind of going on, but in just the worst way, and just hogs the conversation for 15 minutes. It's like, man, I'm here for these people. And now this chick hops in and is talking for 15 minutes. I don't want to hear you, especially on time speed. I don't know. I was trying to think of ways that they could do it. If they make tiers of conversation where if you're one of the first people in, you're a first degree speaker and then second degree, so that these people kind of function in and function out, or maybe just the moderators have to get better at jumping in and cutting people off. But it is such a nice little community that's building. Everyone's so polite that they don't want it. They'll let Turquoise go for 15 minutes. And it's you can tell that other people are trying to pull it away. And when they get on the mic, and then also I feel it's just very discombobulated, because you see these rooms that have 15 people in there, and then everyone's you just see a constant, everyone unmuting to try and say something. You just see these mute and unmute things popping up all over the place.
100%. It's one of those things. I think this is all growing pains. I think
growing pains. These are things that are going to get figured out.
Yeah, like what you said is, it makes total sense, and I think that's the difficult. With a podcast, one of the benefits of a podcast is it's usually more streamlined. It's usually more focused on that topic at hand. Sometimes they'll go off topic, but at the end of the day, you're I'm here for these 2 people. Yeah. Whereas in the Clubhouse chat, you might be here for 2 people, but there's 15, right? Or there's 15 speakers and 500 listeners. Yeah. So I think there's pros and cons. On the other hand, I think I was thinking about the fact of, with that Section 230 bill, you might have been able to get 1 of those people on a podcast. Yeah. Would you be able to get 15? Yeah. Right. And that's kind of what you trade off in streamlined conversation and speed and ease of access. You kind of improve in ability to hear from multiple perspectives and ability to have debate from multiple perspectives. And so, and I also look at it from 2 ways. There's the Clubhouse channels that I join to listen, to learn. And then there's Clubhouse channels that I physically am helping shape, because I'm one of the speakers, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are interesting in the sense that I've been moderators for some of these channels, and it's how do I put it? It's like moderating a panel, or moderating you're trying to make sure everyone speaks. You're trying to make sure there's a flow of conversation. It's actually a cool skill that you can kind of develop. And so it's interesting. Your Clubhouse experience can be dramatically different based on how you choose to, do you choose to be an audience member in these minds that you want to pursue, or do you choose to be an active participant in maybe a smaller room? And either of those things are both really cool, different experiences. Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe I'm not getting the full experience just because I have only jumped in a couple of times to listen to a couple ones with some minds that I really like, right? It's just, those are that many people that I really look up to are all getting in a room. I'll listen in on that. The other gripe I have is, it's not easily controllable to pause it, play it, because it's always running. There's conversations going, and my girlfriend's asking me a question, and then I've missed half the conversation, and I don't know how to get 100%. Back to it. Right? It's
It's why it's not gonna replace podcasts. I think it's similar to podcasts, but it's not gonna replace podcasts.
No, yeah.
And I think like I've had a podcast I listen to a lot now that's just blown up, by the way. You've probably heard of it, the All In podcast. Have you heard of these guys?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never listened to it though.
So this is with Chamath. I know Saad's referenced Chamath a lot on this pod, right? The Chamath is this guy who used to work for Facebook in growth, quit Facebook because he's like, I don't really think what we're building is ethical, created like a social venture capital fund, is like this billionaire who co-owns the Gold State Warriors, super, super cool guy. Oh. His family's originally from Sri Lanka, grew up on welfare in Canada. And then immigrated to the States and, has become this successful person. And himself and 3 of his friends who were his poker buddies, who were also just like huge investors and huge business people, said, like, F the system, let's just make our own pod. And it's now become one of the #1 podcasts in technology in the world, right? And they've only put out, 20 episodes? It's not like a 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 episode thing. And it's phenomenal. Like for GameStop, when the GameStop situation happened, Jason Calacanis is an investor in GameSpot, and Chamath has investments in other places. And Chamath is just like shitting on Jason, and Jason and him are just going back and forth. Yeah. And then the next episode, they like apologize, like, I'm sorry, we went a little too hard. And then they invite Vlad on, like 2 episodes later. They're like, hey, Vlad, let's talk with you direct. Like, what happened? Like, what's the situation? Let's have this discussion. And it's just phenomenal because you're getting these insights directly from the horse's mouth. You're getting these long form conversations directly from the horse's mouth. And they've become like, they're a great case study in just like popularity, in the sense that I think all 4 of those people had followings in the business and tech community. And when they came together, it was like 4X.
Right. And that's so interesting to hear, of like, a podcast that's 20 episodes in, getting that much notoriety, right? Which is so antithetical to kind of what podcasting is. And it's just such a slow growth, and it's a slow build of finding your community of, I think there's a lot of times where people have followings, right? And you say, oh, you're going to start a podcast because you have a following, right? But it depends on how you built that following. Are they following you because of something you built, or are they following you because they are there for who you are, right? And I feel like a podcast is so much of you putting out who you are to people on a very vulnerable level that sometimes people didn't come for that. They're not following you, right? Like, I feel like there's actors or actresses that see podcasting, see that there's money in it, and they jump into it thinking like, oh, that's something.
Yeah. Anyway, I was going to say, it's like, so these guys, I think the reason why their podcast works is because they're all extremely knowledgeable about these topics they're talking about, tech and business. And so we trust them for their tech and business insights. Now, if they made a podcast about celebrity gossip, we'd be like, I don't care what Chamath Palihapitiya or Jason Calacanis thinks about celebrity gossip, right?
Yeah.
And I think with celebrities, that's the trap, because there's so many of them. There's so many of these quote unquote celebrity podcasts, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm a big deal and I'm going to invite them, so that you almost start being like, okay, well, which one of these people are just kind of doing it to do it, and which one of these people are kind of like serious about the craft, right, of podcasting. That's why, funny enough, one of the ones that I recently got into, the armchair expert, Dax Shepard, I've actually really enjoyed that pod. And I was going to recommend this podcast episode to you. Brene Brown, Tim Ferriss, Dax Shepard. They did a podcast episode about the art of podcasting. Wow. And they also just get into like, addictions and relationships and all that jazz. Cause they're all very emotionally intelligent people. Phenomenal listen. Phenomenal. Cause they all have very different approaches. And I listen to all 3 of their podcasts and I get different things. Like for Brene, it's usually emotional intelligence. For Tim, it's usually habits. For Dax, it's usually like the different side of these celebrities and digging into kind of their maybe their addictions or what they were going through growing up and how that's manifested. And, I listen to them for different things, and it's crazy to hear about their different ways they structured their podcast, why they did it this way, how they do episodes, what are some of the negative impulses they have to control, all these things that you would never really consider. And they just take you behind the scenes, which is great.
Yeah, I love those types of podcasts, and I love Tim Ferriss, and I love Dax Shepard. So, I mean, I'm definitely going to check that out. That's a great recommendation. But just kind of going back to what I was saying in those 4 guys that you say, because I feel like this is a very important point, and I feel like I didn't make it very well. It's not even about how it is about how you gained your following. But I think, like you talk about those 4 guys, they're highly intelligent and people follow them because they recognize that. So then when they go to a podcast, they're showing that intelligence, right? And I feel like there's people who are good at something, but are not who they are as a person when they put that out. Either they're not willing to, like, which I think is maybe that example I use with the actors and actresses. It's not that they're not good people that are very interesting, have something to show. It's just they're not willing to be as vulnerable to show that side where they're kind of putting on an act for it. Whereas if you are very confident in yourself, you're confident in who you are, and you're very okay with that vulnerability of, showing how you got there and where you need work, and you have that confidence in what you've already brought to the table and what you're going to bring to the table in the future, you have that ability to go on and be vulnerable, and people will connect with that very quickly. Right. And they will, it's hard for people to put on an act in the long form. And I feel like people can see through it very quickly. If you're not, protected by those, there's going to be a commercial in 7 minutes, so you're going to talk for 3, and, you can't really get too much of a look inside of who somebody is. But if you're there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, people are going to know exactly who you are. Right. And you can maybe put on an act for a little bit, but if you're going to be coming back episode after episode, you're going to have to show pieces of who you are. And if you're confident in that and you have something to bring to the world and people are going to connect with that, they'll connect with it quickly. But if it's not there, or if you're not willing to get there, it's never going to work. And I think that's the biggest difference between people trying to get into podcasts just to make a quick buck on it, and people that really believe in it and are willing to show that vulnerability and give the world part of who they are to show that. Right. And I feel like that is the biggest change in those. And I love hearing the nitty gritty of, people. I think, talking about Tim Ferriss and Dax Shepard, those are people that already have that and have already shown that they aren't in it just to make a quick buck. And to hear those types of people talk about how they do it, I love that. Right. I don't want to hear about some person that just started to make a buck and now they're going to tell you how to monetize it. Right. Like, there's no interest in that to people. And I feel like those are the ones that crash and burn, because people can feel the inauthentic.
You can smell it.
Yeah, you can
smell it from a mile away.
100% you can. And I feel like that's why it's so interesting for somebody like Lex Friedman, not to bring it back to him every time like I do, but he started off with the podcast just wanting to talk about AI, right? He had the AI podcast and he just wanted to bring more people into understanding and bring these big names in the AI world to people and distribute this information, get kind of the overall knowledge of what that industry is up for everybody else. But it very quickly turned into people connecting with who he is as a person, right? Because of him throwing himself out there into the fire to do that role, to serve as that role, to be that host that's going to bring these ideas forward. But he's got to ask questions, and for it to be success, he has to put some of himself out there. And very quickly people locked onto it, and he grew very quickly because people realize who he is and love that, right? I love who Lex is as a person, right? So now I love his AI guests, but now he can have on, Dan Gable, who's a wrestler. And obviously that is big for me because I love MMA, but trying to find one that isn't up my alley, right? Like, just recently. So he just had, go ahead. So I was going to say,
because you formed a relationship with him, and
yes,
you now I trust your judgment. So I'll listen to a guest that I wouldn't normally listen to.
Exactly. Like right now there's a guest he just had on who's one of the biggest names. I think he started JavaScript or something, but he started all these web browsers and kind of is going through the history of all the web browsers and the wars and how they got started, and kind of goes through the whole Microsoft thing. And it is way over my head, right? Like it's very cool. But I probably was taking in maybe 10% of what was being said, like, because I just don't have enough knowledge. Like, I'm sure I'll be able to pick up a little thing here and there that'll come up and be useful some point in the future. But because I love Lex so much, I'm going into that. It doesn't matter what the guest is, right? And I think that was first shown to me by Joe Rogan, where, people always talk about when you ask somebody if they're a Joe Rogan fan, there's two different fans, one that listens to every episode and one that waits and just, that name sounds familiar. And I like Joe. So if he has a good guest, I'll watch that, right? And it's that different level of, once I got to that point with Joe where it didn't matter what the guest was going to be, I knew I'm going to enjoy this just because I enjoy who he is and his line of questioning. And I like following this journey of how he is sharpening his mind and testing his ideas against these people. And you can follow, if you listen to all these podcasts, you can follow over these years how he has landed to who he is today and these beliefs he holds. You can almost go back over the years and watch them be formed in real time, right? Episode after episode, you can see him changing slightly on certain positions, softening here, hardening here, right? And you can get to see it be built. And that is so special because now you have that understanding that goes past so many levels of, I think there's people that listen to Joe Rogan's podcast or Lex Friedman's podcast, anybody that has that much out there, they'll know them better than some of their best friends, right? That have it, because it's such an intimate process. And that's what they talk about is the weirdness of running into people on the street that know them intimately, right? And it's not like running into a fan. Like, no, they know that your dog died. They know
Yeah,
that, right? And
it's weird, man. It's super weird. Like I've thought about like if I met a podcaster, right, and I was just like, like Tim Ferriss, for example. Like Tim just you heard that episode he did where he opened up about his like childhood sexual assault or something like that.
I haven't seen it, but
so yeah, crazy. Like he had this episode. Well, first of all, I've been listening to Tim for ages, and what I loved about Tim was like he was able to get people to just kind of open up about the hardships in their life and kind of how they've overcome them and what tactics they've used to become successful. And like this dude like literally did this podcast episode about his own experiences with assault as a kid, and it was just so raw and vulnerable. And I was just thinking, I've never met you, but I know this deep, dark, intimate thing, and you shared it over an hour and a half with me, and I feel like very connected with you now, man. Like and not only just that though, but like I've heard him on other episodes talk about issues with depression, issues with psychedelic, his conversations about psychedelics and how psychedelics has changed his life, his conversation about entrepreneurship and the stresses and benefits of that, all these things. And I could just like, I know so much about you, but you know nothing about me. Yeah. And it's like a weird power imbalance. Like if I ever met, I'd be like trying to like be respectful of that dynamic, but difficultly, because I'm like, I know you, man. You're like, we're best friends. And he's like, who the fuck are you, man? Like, I've never met you in my life.
Yeah. And that's kind of an odd after effect, because so many people the first people that got to that stage that were able to realize that weirdness of that dynamic of having so much out there were the first ones to have that, right? Because like, if you're thinking about some of the biggest, Tim Ferriss is probably a good example, right? The Joe Rogans of the world. By the time they got to that point where they had enough content out where people could know them that well, they were the first ones there. They were there was no other podcast before them that could show them and that they could talk about. So they were, when they started the podcast, they never thought about the consequences of that happening in the future. They were already so far into it that they realized it, right? And now that's just one of those, things you take on, right? Like for the longest time, people kind of had an understanding of what celebrity would be, right? And what you're giving up. And then that changed very rapidly with the advent of the internet, right? Like what it was to be a celebrity was almost the same thing from Elvis to like Michael Jackson, right? Like you were famous in the same kind of ways to the same depth for a long time. And then the advent of the internet kind of changed all that and flipped it on its head. And now your idea of what famous is going to be by the time that you approach it, nobody knows what fame is going to be like. What's it going to be like to be famous in 2025?
I don't know, man. And it's
if I know.
Not even just fame though. Like I think that internet, social media, these 21st century phenomenons have, taken, long form human trends and tribal trends and those kinds of things and absolutely exacerbated them. Right. Yeah. And they've introduced challenges that we've never had to think about before. Yeah. Right. Like we never had to think about, how is my teenage daughter's mental health going to be through social media usage? And how do I create an ecosystem? Like how do we react to this? Right. As educators, as parents, how do we react to this? Or like on the flip side, how does a social media ecosystem and democracy interplay, right? What are the risks there? What are the externalities there? Like so by the way, just to give you a little bit more context, like a career goal of mine is actually I'm very interested in technology policy. And, right now I'm working in AI, but I would love to be in the public policy sphere here and try to craft policy to kind of deal with these problems, because they're so complicated and multifaceted and nuanced. And frankly, like if you heard, you remember back in the day when Zuckerberg went on the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress hearings, and then you listen to some of these dinosaurs asking him questions like, if I send a Facebook message to my email, like, do I get what? I watched that and I was pissed because I was like, okay, let me get this straight. We have these massive monopolies and these massive networks that are, the GDPs of almost every developed country, right? They're like bigger than that. And, they have all this power, all this influence, have all this impact, some positive, a lot, and also a lot of negative externalities. And we have nobody, like we don't, to be fair, there are some smart, thoughtful politicians, but for the most part, people who are like, don't understand this stuff there. And that scared the crap out of me. So I think for me, like I'm very passionate about this space, and I'd love to take my career into this space because I think it's just going to be so important thinking about like what kind of guardrails or what kind of guidelines can we create to create a healthy ecosystem that, you know, still allows for robust discussion, still allows for civil discussion, but also deals with some of the negative externalities. That's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Right. And I think that is immensely important. I think that's one of my biggest influences, Eric Weinstein. He always talks about the issue. So much of the issues we're seeing today is a consequence of having people too out of touch with current reality in these spaces that are making those decisions, right? That's a perfect example when Zuckerberg was up against Congress there, and you see what types of things are coming down the pike. Like, yikes, this is our defenders of this freedom, right? Like the people that are supposed to keep these megaliths in check, these Facebooks of the world in check, is that, right? And he's saying like, that is so much of the issue, right? Like universities, all these heads are all that old. You know, you have the head of a university be 75 years old, and the entire board of governors is, you know, 65 plus. They don't understand what's coming down the pike in terms of AI and how the internet is changing all these things. They have no idea. And that is a very scary prospect, especially when you get into the domain of AI. I think I was scared of AI for a long time. I think reading the unincorporated man by the Coen brothers, who I was lucky enough to have on this podcast. That was one of the coolest things I've ever had in my life, was to have two of my favorite authors on. It was so cool. I recommend anybody go listen to that past episode. But there's a storyline in their first book of that series where they go through how it's a book set in the future, and they go through how society collapsed due to virtual reality and what AI kind of did, but taking over that and making life better for people. And then society kind of collapsed because life was better in virtual reality. So everybody was just staying inside of these fantasy worlds, and, you know, all the functionality that a society needs to keep it running, you know, keeping food coming to the people, keeping, you know, roads working, all that stuff kind of collapsed. And it was very scary for me. And then I was scared of AI. And then I heard, you know, some of the comments Elon Musk was making about AI, and I just, you know, getting very worried. And I didn't have a lot of understanding. I had looked into AI a lot on my own, and I think that ramped up a lot of that fear of just seeing the power of what it can be and what could be coming down the road in the future. But I found, starting to listen to Lex Fridman, who I think is the perfect person for this, because he's just endlessly optimistic. He is just always sees the good.
Yeah, he's got a pretty nuanced perspective on. I listened to, like, after I heard your pod, I listened to some stuff with Lex, right? Because I'd heard of him, but I'd never actually taken the time. And what I liked about Lex was, like, he's willing to recognize, okay, here are some of the potential harms that could happen, but here are some of the benefits. And based off these harms and benefits, I think we can, like, choose this path, right?
Right. And I think having that, having him be the medium, him be the host that brings all the biggest minds in AI on and talks about all these different areas of both future innovation and future worries of where it could go. I found it was so nice to have that optimistic viewpoint be the thing that kind of the boat that carries you through those scary waters. But also what I found was even less than that was just having more information around it, understanding on a deeper level how this AI stuff works, how these neural networks work, how they're building them, what kind of steps, what is the actual worries, right? Like, my fear was so much built upon my ignorance of the thing itself. And okay, there's so many different ways AI could end the world tomorrow, right? What ones do we have to worry about? And it was just that uncertain, there's uncertain fear and there's certain fear. It's almost relative to, like, you know, rational and irrational fears. I feel like I knew AI was a rational fear, but I was irrationally afraid of it because I didn't have the knowledge to understand what should I be worried about. I found after listening to, you know, 150 episodes of Lex Fridman, having all the big names on, and him himself being an expert in all these different areas that I've looked into it, I now have so much better understanding of AI and what things we do need to worry about, what things we don't need to be worried about, that I'm still very worried about it, but it's almost I've rationalized my fear around it. I've figured out what things I do need to be afraid of, what pieces you don't, and then what pieces are out there that are going to combat that, right? Because there's so much in that AI field that is protecting against some of those big fears. So, I mean, that was a bit of a ramble just to kind of show you where my experience with AI got to. But I want to ask you, what do you see as the big fears? What are the things that worry you right off the bat that are going to be hurdles that we have to, handle, not in the next 20 years, but maybe in the next 1 or 2 or 3?
With AI?
Yes.
I don't know about so the way I would approach it is this. I think we have to take a look at, so to give you context, right now, the company I work for, we do a lot of applied artificial intelligence, right? So the work that we do is we work with a lot of legacy companies and companies in oil and gas or healthcare or government or whatever. And we're trying to find ways to use AI to augment their processes and decrease risk, increase revenue, and reduce costs. And so the way that that is a very specialized form of artificial intelligence as opposed to artificial general intelligence, right? Yeah. Which is a lot of where I think the fear is AGI becoming so smart that it overcomes, human.
And maybe just for people listening, maybe we should just quickly stop at AI versus AGI just to explain that to people. So there's this thought of, AI, artificial intelligence, right? And that was always kind of the all-encompassing term of what neural networks and self-learning computers that take information and get better, right? That was kind of that AI thing. And AGI, automated general intelligence, is kind of a new word that is being bandied about for that I don't know, watershed moment, or that, what's the word where it kind of tips over and falls into the next.
The word is escaping me too, but I know what you mean. The super, it's like
supernova or something like that, right? That flashpoint moment where it changes over, and now it comes down to almost consciousness, right? Like AI can be really smart, but it's not conscious. It can't do things, right? It can't make its own decisions.
Singularity.
Singularity. That is what I was at. It's supernova. That was close enough. Yeah. So they're waiting for that singularity moment where AI progresses into AGI, where it's automated general intelligence. It doesn't just, we take artificial intelligence, put it into this domain to solve X problem. No, it's solving its own problems. It's deciding what problems it needs to make. So that's kind of the AI versus AGI. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you all together, but it is such a big
great context.
Yeah.
Great context. And the important context about this that I want to tell to your listeners is when we think about AI, at least traditionally, the thought process has been like Terminator, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, AI is going to come in and it's going to destroy us. And that is the AGI kind of belief. And there's, Elon is a great example of people who are kind of afraid of this and the path that we could go. A lot of what I deal with at work, and I come from a non-technical perspective, by the way, but I've learned a lot from being in communications here. And a lot of what we deal with is very specialized applications of machine learning and artificial intelligence to, derive value, increase efficiency. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. So we did some work with Dynalife, right? And this stuff is public, so I can talk about it, where, pathologists would diagnose disease, right? And so the way that what would happen is you would go into a pathology lab for like a colon polyp sample, right? Mm-hmm. You'd get the sample, it'd be sent off to a pathologist to analyze. Now, nobody at the time, they couldn't determine whether or not the sample was sufficient or insufficient for analysis. So what happened was the pathologist would call you and again, like, hey man, can you do another sample? Or hey, can you do another sample? And that would happen 2 or 3 times. And this would increase the weeks and the length of time to diagnose a disease. Mm-hmm. We came in with a computer vision model that could analyze a colon polyp and tell you right away whether or not that was sufficient. If it was insufficient, it would get you to do another colon polyp, right? And colon polyp sample. And what we did was, by doing this, we reduced the amount of times people had to take multiple samples, and we reduced disease diagnosis time by weeks, right? So those are kind of the applications of artificial intelligence that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day. It's not about, perhaps, AI becoming this sentient being that's going to, destroy humanity, which, there's conversations that are there, but what I'm dealing with is more like, how can we use AI to either get rid of things that humans don't want to do, or make things more efficient, automate certain processes. And, by doing so in places like healthcare, we're actually, improving health outcomes, which are beneficial. Right. And so I think that's the nuanced approach where it's like, yes, there are these risks of AI with regards to, AI biases, responsible AI, ethical AI. the way algorithms are designed. There are those risks. There are the risks of AGI becoming so powerful. There are those risks. But then there are also the benefits of like, what can we use this to augment or enhance the way we already do things?
Yeah. And I think that was for so long, so many people, that was the big worry, was AGI, right? Like, and not even that it's going to take over the world or like turn on humans. I feel like that is almost even taking it another step that doesn't need to. It's scary even before that, right? To me, there's so many different worries, right? There's the AGI worry, which to me is an arms race, right? Who's going to get it first? Because the first person to get a real automated intelligence that is self-evolving and grows at that pace, that the rate of advancement for them, they will be able to, I think it's something they said, like the first one should be able to be 10,000 times more efficient. So say it takes humans, a day of work to get to this point, it takes them, 30 seconds of compute time. And in that time, now they're that much farther ahead of you. So now on their next round, it feedbacks so quickly and it ramps up so quickly that, say China was the first person to get AGI, they would dominate the planet in a matter of days, right? Like that is one worry. And that was what was worrying me for a long time. But it seems like AGI and consciousness more so is so misunderstood right now that people are farther away from that than they think. But there's this new way of thinking that instead of trying to design consciousness and figure that out, is if we keep with these neural nets, right? Like keep applying more information to these data systems and giving them more and more and more, eventually it will cross that threshold. And eventually, even if we don't understand it, it will become conscious, right? There's a real argument between all these smart people. Is consciousness its own thing? Is it like a soul? Is it something that is ineffable that we can't really control and we don't know what it is? Or is it just enough input and enough processing power that it's just when you, right? It's like people trying to understand what the brain is, right? Like, what are our thoughts? Is that just a really good computer in there that's doing all these computes, taking in visual, audio, taste, smell, taking all that and computing this back out? Or is it something more than that, where on some level, right? So there's not an understanding there. But what worries me more than that almost is there's huge benefits to be made, like you've already said, right? Of taking these less intelligent, just, neural networks and applying them. How can we make this better? How can we apply AI to this system to solve a problem, right? What worries me is the lack of understanding. So many people are so focused on results right now that all they care about is the results. If they can apply AI, even if they don't understand how it's getting these things, I think there's so many areas we could sit here for days, think of all the examples of areas where AI is helping us, but we don't know how. And that worries me. I think there needs to be
black box.
The black box. Yeah.
It's often discussed, the black box, like, is there transparency into the way that the algorithms are designed? And, this is a conversation that's really occurring in backlash to the social media companies, for example, right?
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going with it.
Yeah, a lot of their AI algorithms are designed in a way so the AI algorithms are designed inherently to promote engagement, which in of itself sounds very harmless. Okay, that makes sense. They're a social media company.
They want you to stay on their apps.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. But the problem is, and I'm going to be referencing something you've probably already heard, but Tristan Harris's interview on Joe Rogan. You've heard that, right?
Yeah, which one was Tristan? I mean, I've seen every Joe Rogan, so I'm sure I've seen it. I just need to be reminded of which guy.
He was the guy from Social Dilemma.
Oh, right. Yeah. That was a good episode. Yeah.
That was a great one. I just heard that yesterday, funny enough. So the problem is that the most engaging content is often the content that is the most incendiary, the most misinformed, the most sensationalized, the most designed to provoke polarization. And, he had a great anecdote where he talked about, you could start on a YouTube, spree with like the most kind, calm kind of content. And the algorithm would try to show you more and more provocative content to entice you to stay, right? More clickbaity content, more provocative content. And this is even more, I think this other scary part about this is it's even more exacerbated by the fact that every single person on a social media platform has a different experience because of the way that algorithm is designed based off the ways that you view things. They often say that, the user is the product. And I actually disagree with that. I think it's not, and I'll tell you why. The user is actually more like the raw material, right? What the raw material is, the user's likes, the user's views, the user's time spent, the user's engagement, all the actions they take on an app.
Mm-hmm.
That raw material is then processed through specific algorithms and analytics. And what's outputted is a behavioral future that is targeted with an advertisement or a post that says, hey, this person is likely to buy this thing because of this thing, or this person is likely to view this thing because of this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the product, those behavioral futures that they're selling to advertisers, and those behavioral futures. And
not just advertisers, political company, right? Like that, the fact that there's a huge bifurcation of right versus left in tech companies, all these Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, they're all extremely biased to one side. And that is worrying because the amount of information that they have and what they can build in terms of information on you is so much influence. They pretty much rule the world. How can you beat, if somebody has that versus somebody has, good ideas, they're going to win out every time, right? If somebody has that kind of raw data to run a campaign on that with that kind of information in their back pocket, they're unstoppable, right? So now at what point does that become a democratic issue where that needs to be freely, the amount of information people get? It's one thing on advertising. I do see that as an issue, but to me, it's more the politics. And
I hear you.
And even farther than just, what's going to win you an election of just, what can we do right now? How much can we push? What kind of restrictions can we put on COVID without people pushing back? Now you have all this social media data to know exactly how far you can push it. Okay, we can get away with putting people into hotels and lock them away if we call it this, but if we call it this, they're going to push back. It's so much information at their input, and the little guy, the me's and you's of the world, just on the individual basis, we're so powerless. When you compare what we are compared to what they have against us, it is such an uneven battlefield that the only way to push back against it is for everybody to band together and say, hey, this is bullshit. Like we need something better than this. This is not going to work for us. Right.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of interrelated yet different challenges here. One of them being the excess of data and the lack of privacy. The other one being the difficulties around, civil liberties and censorship. The other one being, the difficulties with, bots and fake accounts spreading misinformation to kind of screw up public dialogue. Right. And so a lot of this is based off the fact, one of the biggest reasons this is happening is the core business model, right? The fact that it's based off engagement, and a lot of these things that are most engaged with are these things that are kind of incendiary or fake or just are meant to stir up shit. I think I pulled some quotes that I thought were fascinating about this. So have you heard of there was a Facebook whistleblower named Sophie Zhang, right? She was a former data scientist. And one of the things that she said was, I'm just going to read this out loud. In the 3 years I've spent at Facebook, I found multiple blatant attempts by foreign national governments to abuse our platform on vast scales to mislead their own citizenry and cause international news on multiple occasions. Right? She referenced how in India, there was a politically sophisticated network of more than 1,000 actors working to influence the elections. She mentioned how there was millions of fake accounts and bots. So it says Zhang and her colleagues removed 10.5 million fake reactions and fans from high-profile politicians in Brazil and the US. She's mentioned, not just her, but on the Tristan episode, she's mentioned how memes are being used to dictate dialogue, and you have foreign so before, if you took a look at warfare before, right, between a country let's say Russia or China and the United States, warfare was seen in a very traditional sense from weaponry or maybe in Cold Warfare. What can happen now is they can take a look at amplifying points of dissent, right, and putting tons of money into those points of dissent, or creating millions of fake accounts, right? And the difficult thing is with this, whether you are more conservative leaning and are worried about censorship and about, freedom of expression and civil liberties, or whether you're more liberal leaning and you're worried about, maybe fake news, or maybe you're worried about, things like wild conspiracy theories, not saying all conspiracy theories are wild, but like the wild ones spreading, right? And influencing people into thinking these things that are sensationalized, right? The difficult thing is, on both accounts, do we trust the social media companies to be the ones dealing with it? That's the challenge, right? Like, I don't trust the social media companies to be the ones dealing with it, nor do I trust like an individual government, because, governments are run by different actors. You may be like, for example, you may say, okay, whoever's in charge in the United States right now, I trust them at this point in time. Would you trust them 4 years, 8 years from now? Right now in India, for example, okay? And I say this, this is where my views on this are a little bit more robust and nuanced than perhaps the traditional left perspective, because, in India, because I've seen this being used the other way. In India, the Modi administration has pressured Twitter and Facebook to crack down on farmers' protests and take down posts on farmers' protests. And these people are protesting injustice, right? And they've actually, like Indian politicians have said, you guys should go on Coup, which is like an Indian Twitter, right? Like a Twitter equivalent, right? And they're trying to prop up Coup because like China, they're trying to get Indian companies who are willing to play ball, right? And so it's such a difficult, challenging area. And I just don't feel like, I don't know if I would trust an individual government. I don't know if I would trust a social media company. I think maybe the system that could work that's been thrown out is like creating like an internet judiciary, right? Like an independent internet judiciary, an online bill of rights, and objective legal standards, so that, for example, if your post or your content has been removed, you have the ability to take that to an internet court and fight and be like, hey, like, I don't think because, there's going to be, actual times where maybe there's like a horrible like anti-Semite or a horrible person actually spewing hate speech, and we want to get rid of that. But for all of that, there also might be people who are coming in and who are just being labeled that because that's what the people in power want, to suppress speech. You see what I'm saying? And so that's why I am much more in favor of an objective legal standard, where there has to be an argument made that's objective and, based off very clear standards, than I am on social media companies enacting it based off their community standards, which can be subjective and which can be, which can be swayed by public opinion, whether that's from society or governments like in India.
Yeah, no, there's so much you said there and so many different areas to add to that. I think you're right on a lot of those things. I think a judiciary could be one scenario to fix it. I don't think it'll happen. I think it's just too big. I think it'd be too much. Like, who's going to pay for it? Because there's going to be things happening all the time. The internet is just too large. I think the only way that I see is that right now, like you said, there's 1,000 people in India that are just making fake accounts and just pushing whatever they want to push. There is hundreds of thousands in China, hundreds of thousands in Russia. There's all these countries that are doing this, right? And I'm sure America's doing it. I'm sure Canada's doing it. I'm sure everybody's doing it, because that's how all these things work. Everybody does it because it's effective, right? You just, on that grand stage, you just do what's going to be effective, right? To me, to say, oh, I don't know if I'd trust the social media companies to do it, I don't know if I'd trust governments. To me, I think they're both the same people doing the same thing, right? I think it's the same people making these calls. And I don't think you have to guess, well, I don't know if we can trust the social media companies. Well, I think we've seen what they've done. They think they've proved to us that they can't be trusted with it, right? And I think also government has proved the same thing, because they're in the same pocket, right? Like the tech companies are propping up the politicians at a lot of the points, right? That's where all their funding comes from. And if you look at companies like Facebook and how many people go from Facebook to the Democratic Party in the US, how many people from the Democratic Party in the US now work at Facebook and Twitter? It's a revolving door. It's all the same people.
The national security apparatus connection to big tech is scary.
It's terrifying. Right? It's not, they're not even trying to hide it. People will have like in their Twitter bio, like Facebook, whatever, blah, 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 former Democratic, whatever. It's like, you are not even hiding the issues you have, right? But to me, it's so much scarier than what people are looking at it as, right? I think you used an example when you first brought up, the people in India that were changing how people are looking at things. To me, it's so much more insidious because there's certain things like you see on social media, these big pushes for things that are good in a sense. I'm trying to find it right. It's a delicate topic because I don't want to,
Sure.
I don't want people to think that I'm coming at it a certain way. Like I think there's times where during COVID, right, there's a lot of things that we need more hospital beds. We need to be working at things, right? But then social media, it seems like the current is telling people that is not what's most effective right now. Certain groups don't have rights, and that is what's important, right? And instead of focusing on this, and now you think in terms of what's going to make us a country weak, right? You want to target America, you want to get everybody fighting, and it doesn't even need to be as outrageous as trying to censor one side and let the other side go. You can weaken a country by just changing their priorities or making it seem like, oh, all the people, like Twitter is screaming for change right now. We want change, right? So now all this money and resources gets directed towards this, which is not what the country needs to be strong right now. They need other things. There's certain priorities, but now these outside agencies can influence what a country's moral directive is, right? Which is very worrying to me now.
Because it's not democratic.
It just comes back to
that's the challenge.
There's so many things that are society they put too much stock in social media. They think it's real life. First of all, it's fucking not. Even if you looked at it in the most glamorous outlook, it's not real life. Even people, just on your friends' feeds, how often is that actually representative of what their life is, right? It's going to make it seem a lot different. So it's not real. Then you tap onto that, all these millions and millions of fake accounts that are just, pushing the current one way or another, blowing on this little fire, stirring all this shit up. How we put any sort of weight on what social media does, how we let it affect decisions, right? The fact that these giant companies are kowtowing to what Twitter's saying, when you so clearly see that it's not real in and of itself, and then it's completely overrun with outside influences. How are we letting that impact our decisions? How are we letting social media have any sort of weight, right? So then this is my solution to it. I think the only solution to this is to have a wide scale change where people understand that and wake up to the fact that social media is bullshit. We can't let that dictate, what people say on social media is not what they'll say in real life. And I think you need to find a new social media thing where it takes some sort of, like Clubhouse, where it has some sort of layer where you have to prove who you are, right? Like, again, that worries me with giving away information. And how do you prove you are who you are, and bringing that forward so that, at least this is a representative. It takes a one layer of it being corrupted by these other things. I think that's the only, and then once you have that established, I don't think there's an argument for taking anything off. You mentioned, the craziest anti-Semite, the craziest, all this stuff. You have to let them talk, and you have to let them get them ideas out there. You can't censor it. That just lets it build, and it pushes it underground, and it lets it build. You need to respond. The response to poor speech is better speech. It's not censorship. You need to let them give them enough rope to hang themselves. You can't shut these things down. I feel like that is what they're doing, is because censorship is a tool of power. And the more we allow censorship in all these areas, the more power we're handing over to these tech companies and handing over to the government. Because like I said, it's the same thing.
Right.
We are just handing them power after power. Just take more, all under the guise waving the flag of moving things forward and progress, right? Like, which I see, but I think it's, go ahead.
I hear you. No, I know. I hear you. I think the last part is the only part where I think we have a slight disagreement, because I think there are specific guardrails that, like, and I'll give you an example, right? Places like Germany, right, have robust free speech principles, right? But I've also said, like, because of their history with Nazism, like they don't tolerate any of that, right?
Exactly.
So if they see anything of that sort, right, they're shutting that shit down quick, right? I think it's fair to have, like, this is where I get into objective legal standards versus subjective standards, right? I think it's fair to have objective legal standards that are imposed, saying if you are on the social media platform and you either engage in hate speech, and that's clearly defined legally, or be engaged.
I don't think it's that clearly defined. And I think the definition has gotten so blown out of proportion in the last 10 years that now you can be used for anything. Anything can be hate speech now. I agree with you in principle of what you're trying to put forward, but I think the reality of where we are now is completely gone to that. And I feel like people that try and cling to that of what it should be and what it used to be, our understanding of what we thought this was going to be is just, I don't think you're being. My
only trouble with that though is like, how do we create an environment where, so I'll give you an example. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mark Zuckerberg, puts out that, if somebody puts Holocaust denial videos on Facebook, mm-hmm. I'm not going to remove it because, it's a perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Even if I deeply disagree with it. Right. But we've now recognized like the Holocaust is a recognized fact, right? And the disturbing part is because of the way the algorithm is structured, right? That sort of content, incendiary, fake content, mm-hmm. has actually like been statistically shown to diffuse faster, deeper, and farther mm-hmm. than perhaps more nuanced, thoughtful, long form content. Like, and Tristan's talked about this where he's just like, look, like if I put out like a statement on a really complex issue that's, long form, thoughtful, interesting, cited fully, people aren't really going to read it. But mm-hmm. if I put out like a hit piece that's just like incendiary, right? It will get reads, right? And that's where I get, worried is that, look, if we, in principle, if we say we want all speeches on there because we think censorship is a very slippery slope, that makes sense. But the problem is if the content that is performing the best is also the content that has been seen to be the most fake, the most incendiary, mm-hmm. right? Then if we don't have any guardrails, is that what's gonna, I guess, populate people's minds?
Yeah. So I see what you're saying, but then that argument goes back to now, why are we using these social media apps that have these algorithms in place that are doing this and that have shown, why are we letting them, why are we letting them, it's 100% the algorithms. That's the whole thing at the start, right? Of bringing this up. They don't care about anything but the bottom dollar. And that's, now they have these algorithms. That's what clickbait didn't pop out of nowhere, right? Nobody in the world loves clickbait. Like it's the worst thing. You want to talk about recognized facts. I think that's a recognized fact at this point. Everyone hates it, but it's happening because it's incentivized, right? These algorithms want things that are going to get people mad and get people fired up. It's perfect. That's exactly what it is. It built this. We don't want it. Why do like Facebook and Twitter? It's all clickbait bullshit. It's people get mad. It's garbage. Nobody wants it. It's not even good, but it keeps you glued to it, right? It's like, I hate Apple Music and so many things with iPhone, but I'm so locked into this Apple ecosystem that I'm forced to use it. And I say the same thing with the other side. It's the same shit with these social media platforms. We give them too much power over us to just use these things poorly.
Apple is the one brand though. And like, I listened to this on Tristan and Joe, by the way, Apple is the one brand that's kind of done things a little differently where they just
protect your information.
Yeah. They're like, listen, like we're going to overcharge the fuck out of you for these phones, but in return, right, we're not going to track you. Right. And honestly, like I've been thinking about this. I'd be like, for the networks that I use the most, I'd be willing to pay. You know what I mean?
100%.
If it means that I'm not being tracked, if it means that, the
information isn't being sold.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'd be willing to pay for that 100%.
For sure. And I think that's what it's going to go to. I mean, Lex Friedman, not to keep bringing it up, he has talked many times about starting a new social media network that is based in these things and trying to base it in compassion stuff. It can always be overrun, but use more healthy algorithms, right? You're still going to use algorithms. You still want to try and do your best to connect people with the content that they want, but in a more pure role that isn't just to make money, right? We've seen what happens when you take something like Facebook in a capitalistic system. That is what it comes to. I don't think it's anybody evil. I don't think Zuckerberg's sitting up in a tower like this, like thinking, how can I be all this evil? No, that is what it's going to make the most money. And now he's beholden to his shareholders and all this stuff. It's everybody's beholden to anybody. So it's the what is that one problem? The diffusion of responsibility problem, but on a grand scale, right? This is nobody's. It's not Mark Zuckerberg's fault.
Zuckerberg said it himself. He doesn't want to do it, but the problem is he has to because no independent entity has stepped up. And so the other thing I wanted to say, maybe I kind of want to like this is getting kind of dark, so I want to go on a little bit of a brighter note here. there are some positive efforts, like in Taiwan, for example. What they've tried to do, and I don't necessarily know how they've done this, but I thought this was fascinating. They've tried to create algorithms that reward consensus building. So when two people with opposing viewpoints come together and build consensus, because at the end of the day, man, like democracy functions when you have individuals who have opposing viewpoints but are able to come together on points of consensus and move the population forward for things that improve material conditions for everyday people. Right. And what we need and what Taiwan has recognized is that, one of the ways that they can help foster that is create alter their digital ecosystems so that they reward that. And that I thought that was a step in the right direction. And I hope we can get more of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you nailed it right on the head of saying for progress to be made, you have to have discourse, right? People with opposing ideas. But what's happening right now is opposing ideas aren't allowed. There's one idea and it's this one way and you think this way and it's okay. If you fall out of either side of this band, you're censored, you're pulled off, you're labeled with this thing. And now you're a conspiracy theorist or you're a racist or you're a bigot. You're all these things. They have all these labels for anybody that falls outside of this. What that creates is now you put a bullet right through the head of discourse, right? You cannot have discourse. You can
because the discourse dissects. Yeah, like they go on decentralized platforms and they're congregated. And what happens is everyone that's
builds more. It just builds more echo chambers, right? There's now Twitter is all this one now that you can talk this way on this one. You go on a Parler and you talk this way. You can't have that. You need to have Wild West. Anybody can say anything they want. There's no censorship, right? And I know that comes with some other stuff, but I think we've tried this the other way of just shutting down conversation, just labeling all these people, and you see what happened. Now they use that power. They get used to that power. They're not going to use it sparingly. Power is not something that people handle well. You need to diffuse it. You need to put things in place. That's why we have term limits. That's why we have all these things. It's been a known fact for thousands of years that people don't do very well with power, and power needs to be checked and it needs to be earned. It needs to be all these things. Now you have social media where anybody can hop on, have this amazing power over people to hold their job in their hands, to hold, their relationship or their friendships in their hand by, you could, all pile on and do one, you could get 10 people together to jump on this person over something they said, and you can ruin their lives. Do good with that power, right? So our natural instinct is just to, censor it and try and control it and try and hold it down, when really just got to let things go. I honestly think that the only way we're going to get through this is to find somewhere where people can just talk how they want to talk, and there's going to be some bad shit that comes out of it, but there's good people that will stand up against it and they will counter that speech with good speech. I still think that's why Joe Rogan has a job. That's why the Weinstein brothers have it, because there's people out there that are saying, the solution isn't to censor. Let's just be better. Let's show people the way. Let's give them this accurate information. Let's put them in touch with these better ideas, right? Like, let's try. What happens, the only reason that these conspiracy theories are running like hotcakes is because of the Streisand effect. Everyone's trying to shut them down and just censor it so much. And everyone goes, why are they censoring all this shit? I'm going to go find this. The internet is the internet. You're going to find anything.
That's interesting. That's interesting philosophy.
That's 100% what's pushing all this.
Yeah, this has been interesting for me, and I think even if we have some slight disagreements on censorship, I think for the most part, this has been really good, and you've raised some really good points, and I think for me, even when I look at the topic of censorship, I approach it so delicately because I know how slippery a slope that is, it's just such a tough topic. And one thing I will say though, in prospect to the good speech, I've seen that, in Clubhouse to an extent where if people are acting out of line, people have already just been like, hey man, if you're saying some shit that's disrespectful towards somebody, I will call you out. Right.
Exactly.
And it's the individual stepping up. So that's pretty cool to see.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's because Clubhouse is set up for that, right? It's so much easier to write a tweet and then step away and say something mean. Voice, it's very different. To say something mean to someone is very, very different than just hiding behind a keyboard and typing those words. As long as those words are out there, you could say, oh, that wasn't me. My sister grabbed the phone and typed it up. If it's coming out of your voice and you're saying something, that's very different, right? And I feel like there's a lesson in there somewhere where we need to find ways where there's it all comes down to accountability, right? The thing that makes social media go sideways is there's no accountability. There's these egg pictures, right? People can say whatever they want. That's what allows for people to come in. There's no accountability. And I mean, to me, that's a microcosm of so many other issues that are happening in society. I don't think there's accountability in anything. There's no accountability in politics. How is there politicians that are still getting paychecks when they've absolutely botched at every single level throughout this
Like
entire
when
COVID pandemic.
they're going to Hawaii, like we're gonna sip Mai Tais in Hawaii while y'all supposed to get vaccinated.
Right? There's no accountability, and what that creates when there's no accountability
100%.
is there's frustration. When there's no accountability, it creates externalities, right, that are going to have to be paid somewhere. And we've seen it in social media, and we've seen it, and we're paying for it in our mental health of our children. We're paying for it in the absolutely ripped apart. We have people living in the same country, 5 minutes away that have complete different ideologies. It's like they come from different sides of the world.
Because they don't interact, because we don't have communities, right? And that's a really interesting thing.
Or even they do interact, but the only place they can interact is on these social medias, where all the algorithms, everything is all just trying to tear them apart. So when they do interact, they interact in the system that's designed to tear them apart. Whereas if they come into each other on the street, the same two people from these opposite ideologies could meet on Twitter and have one way, or
because you don't want to like, if you meet somebody on the street though, like you don't want to like just call them out and tear them apart, and you're in person, you're gonna find some compassion. Even if you disagree, like we're gonna, like we've had a wonderful conversation where we've agreed on a lot of things and we've disagreed on some things, and we've just done it in a very respectful fashion. We're like, well, this is what I think, and that's how conversations should be. Yeah. And that's very difficult to replicate on these platforms. So yeah, that's the platforms. I don't want to we're getting pretty dark. I'm trying to think of how we can shift this to lighter territory.
I think maybe one of the things I wanted to ask you about, maybe before we wrap it up, we can kind of get into we had talked a little bit before we got on just about philosophy. And that is, I love philosophers, and I love different philosophies, and I love reading new people that have a very new way of looking at the world, that it's a new frame that you can add to your own, and all these other experiences that you have that just changes how you look. Like right now I'm reading The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and I am absolutely just having my mind
really blown. Book, eh?
Every chapter. Oh my God, I'm just like, I could honestly do a 3-hour podcast just on that book of how influential it's been to me. But I'm curious for you, who are the philosophers that you look up to, that you like to read? Who do you enjoy? And just how maybe did you get into philosophy? Because I feel like that's something, I was always into philosophy. I just didn't know it. I didn't have the language to say I was until just recently, but it's always been something that's kind of been there. So
philosophy to me is fascinating because it's people who are trying to figure out core principles and operating principles of life and core thoughts about, the way that they see the world.
Yeah.
And, when I was in second year university, I took a Greek philosophy class, right? And I read Plato's The Republic, which I don't know if you've read that, but it's a phenomenal, such an interesting read. Like even like I read that, and there's some ideas in there that I disagreed with, but I just was like, oh my God, like thousands of years ago for you to come up with these things, and they still have so much resonance with regards to his discussions about the pros and cons of democracy, his discussions about the allegory of the cave. If you're always
Plato's
staring
cave.
at a specific reality, and then you're finally exposed away, and you say, hey, this is reality, you're going to think that's false. Like, this is what I've seen my whole life, right? And other people that I've listened to, and I'll give a little bit of an interesting anecdote here that so Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, really good book on Stoicism. Right now, so I grew up in a Hindu household, and when I was growing up, I kind of turned religion away, largely because of, and I know you talked about this on previous pods as well. And so for me, my rationale was twofold. Number one, Hinduism, the way that I was taught as a kid, felt very ritualistic. It felt very much like I offer this to the gods and they give me things. And I'm much more of a moral person. I'm like, what kind of values can I practice? How can I be honest? How can I be ethical? Those kinds of things. The second thing was, certain aspects like with regards to the caste system and things like that, I just didn't morally jive with. So I just kind of threw it away. Recently, I actually have started reading the Bhagavad Gita, which I don't know how much you know about the Bhagavad Gita.
Not a ton.
So there's people who've gone on Joe Rogan, by the way, and talked about this as well. And it's this fascinating philosophy text. Yeah. And I've been blown away by the level of philosophy in this text, in the sense that, like, to give you a 30-second spiel, basically Krishna, who is like a incarnation of a Hindu god, Vishnu, is about to go to war with his charioteer Arjuna. And Arjuna is like, yo, man, I don't know if I can go to war against these people. They're fathers and brothers and, their families as well. How can I justify my actions? And then so Krishna gets into this whole ethical diatribe about what is just and what is the meaning of life and like, how can one practice good life? And I'm reading these quotes and I'm like, that's a Stoic principle. I've seen that in Marcus Aurelius. I've seen that in Plato. That's a principle of meditation. I've seen that in Buddhism. And you see the universalities. And so that's where like lately I've kind of gone into philosophy. I'm reading that text right now, and I'm finding it to be fascinating. And I'm now reading it less for like a religious connection or anything like that. I'm more reading it for philosophical curiosity and how I can like take principles into my life. So yeah, that's my relationship to philosophy.
Yeah. And that's awesome to hear. I mean, it's funny because I have talked about that on other podcasts, but just about those universalities that are in all religions and in all philosophies. And philosophy and religion are looked at as two separate things, but really they demarcate at some weird lines, and they're a lot more similar than they are different. One of the biggest things that I enjoyed maybe in that domain was those set of talks that Jordan Peterson and what's his pickle there? Not Tim Ferriss. This is going to kill you. Sam Harris. That's who. Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson have these debates where I think they did 2 in Vancouver, 2 in London. They went all over. I think they did about 6 or 8. Okay, so we're back. Okay, well, I'll try and finish real quick. I don't even remember what I was talking about. But so these talks with Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and Sam Harris is very anti-religion. Jordan Peterson is very much on almost like 99% the same things, but from a different lens, right? They're almost walking the exact same path, but one is from a religious perspective, one is from a philosophical perspective, and both press against each other, and they would find areas where they would agree, like you say, and find areas where they would go against, but then where they push back, they would talk with them and try and find a narrow ground or a middle ground where even where they disconnected and they found they disagreed, they'd be able to knit it back together to get very close. And I watched over like the 6 episodes or whatever it was. They're all on YouTube. If people want to watch them, just Google Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, and it'll come up. But to watch them navigate that world, because it is so closely related, the philosophy and religion side, it was so eye-opening to watch that be done in good faith, wanting to progress their knowledge. They both learned something from each other on both nights. And it was every night you could see their understanding of each other's positions grow to a point that aided their own ability to make their own case. And it was just so beautiful to watch. I loved watching it so much. And it was just so eye-opening I think people really struggle to understand that connection between all the religions. Like we said, those running threads that go through them all. And I found that those two getting on stage together really highlighted a lot of those in very articulate language. And it's interesting. They're both very interesting guys. They've had a lot of time on stage. They both have, a lot of tricks up their sleeves. So just to see those two minds go up against each other with a good moderator every time, the moderator changed, but they'd find somebody that was kind of in the middle of the two sides. And it was just so amazing. I can't recommend that enough to people. And I think from what we've talked about today, I bet you if you listen to those, you will absolutely eat them up. They're so good, man. The best.
One thing I wanted to ask you, actually, funny enough, when I listened to the Saad episode, I thought this was an interesting anecdote, and I thought I wanted to talk to you about this. Was you talked about how, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you talked about how when you were a kid, you kind of turned religion away, and as you've grown older, you've kind of, brought it back into your life in a specific way. I'd be curious to know, like, what provoked that shift, and I guess what was it as a kid versus your relationship now? I'm fascinated by this, just like in terms of how people manage this in their lives.
For sure. I mean, for me, it was doing a lot of personal work on myself and getting out of my own way of, working on my ego. I have a big ego, and for a long time, I just kind of let it rule me. And in the last, like when I found podcasts, I think that was what kind of started looking into that stuff. But I found a lot of people. I found Aubrey Marcus, who is an amazing spiritual leader, Pete Holmes, who's a comedian, but also, very into Ram Dass and a lot of the Hindu and Buddhist religions and so many of those pieces, Duncan Trussell, a lot of these psychedelic psychonauts that, I haven't maybe gone down some of the paths they have yet. I think I'm very interested in it. Maybe in the future I would, but they kind of all opened my eyes to something that I've always felt. It was like this truth that I felt, and it felt like my understanding of religion. It was like you're close, but it's infected almost. Like this isn't the true spirit of what it is. This is you trying to make sure that your slice of this religion, right? Whether it's Christianity, you want this to win, and you're purposefully looking at things and framing things in a way that may be untrue, but it helps your case for this one specific religion. And that's what pissed me off. And that's what kind of made me push it all away. And that's what I labeled all religion with. But once I got to see these people that I really respect talk about what they've learned from Hinduism, what they've learned from Buddhism, what they've learned from Catholicism, all these things, and where those current threads run through them all, and to see that, and then to put it into language where now you make that argument of all those common threads that run through, all those religions, and you can find that in psychedelics, and you can find that in meditation. You can find all these things are just find different people at the same time in different places in the world, finding words, finding language to apply to this deep inner truth. And I feel like so many people laugh at the language surrounding, like, oh, you think somebody came back to life after 3 days and stuff. And they're just laughing at the language around and all these stories that surround trying to explain this one ineffable thing. And I feel like if you focus on one, it seems pretty silly, right? Like if you look at one religion and just look at it as if it's, reality, there's some silliness in between, right? But if you just take them all abstract and look for the common threads and find what they're really trying to do, they're all allegories. They're all just trying to tell stories. And language is a very poor substitution for real ideas, right? And conveying those. And I feel like that's hearing that from people. It took finding people that I look up to that gave religion a chance for me to give it a chance again. And then through that lens, I found that it connected with me really deeply. And now I'm a much more spiritual person. I'm a much more understanding and willing to give these things a try when I hear people talking about them. Whereas before I was so closed off to it. So it's been quite the journey for myself to get there. And I found that it has paid off so many times over,
that's awesome.
The last couple of months of just being in that place of being much more open about all these ideas, right? Even stuff so silly as, like astronomy or astrology and all that stuff, like just not even giving it the time of day. Still don't give it a lot of time, but I give it more time than I used to. I don't immediately write it off like I used to.
There's all that meme that's like, what's not officially a cult but acts like a cult. And I was just like, you got, man, like astrology. No, I'm not gonna. The astrology brigade will come after me if I shit on astrology. By the way, I'm an Aquarius sun. I'm a Aries moon. I think that's what I'm at. Make your judgments as you may. So when I listen to this podcast, like, oh, that makes total sense. Oh my gosh, he's such a freaking Aquarius.
Such an Aquarius.
Wow.
Oh, man. I've yet, and that's the thing with stuff like that. Like I'm willing to give it a chance if somebody can give me good, not proof, but just if I can see it effectively work in somebody that is not already a believer. Or right, there's certain ways that like I'm open to the fact of it being real. I just haven't been proven yet. Whereas before, I wouldn't wait for that proof. If I decided that, something wasn't real, I just assumed everything wasn't real until it proved to me. Now I assume everything is real until it's disproved or until you can bring something to me. And that's not even explaining it well enough. I feel like going through that process with religion and that really opened me up to being.
You have a more open mind. It seems like you have a more open mind. You're more amenable to different circumstances. You're willing to look at things as a whole and take what you like and extract.
Right. Which is funny for people that I think that knew me in Lister. I was so not that way. I was so closed-minded. I was so stubborn with it. And I'm still very stubborn, but I was so closed off to so many of those things that once I graduated and found podcasts and kind of did my own work and started working on myself and asking some questions about what I don't like about myself and where it came from as a child and started to forgive myself and start to love myself, I feel like I'm such a different person that it's interesting for me to reconnect with people that I knew in the past, because I feel like I don't feel much of a connection to that person because I'm so different now. Right. And I understand.
I don't either. Like, frankly, like the person that I was in first year Lister, like I don't know that kid. Like I don't, like, there's so many more layers that have been added since then. And we've grown so much since then. Right.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. another thing that I was curious about when I listened to you and Saad talk, by the way, I was amazed by the level of introspective work that both of you had done, right? In the sense that you were able to talk about your relationship to your ego, your relationship to, and I've done some of that, but like, I don't think I've done it to that extent. I'd be curious to know if there are any books you've read or anything you've read in that area that's helped you to be like, okay, here's some of the tools to do the work on myself.
Oh man. I think more than books, it would probably be podcasts. I think if I had to recommend one podcast for people, I think if you listen to Aubrey Marcus, I think he is the person that most eloquently described the process of looking at yourself. Maybe Duncan Trussell as well. I think both those people, they really lay out clearly what it's like and the typical hero's journey and what you go through and those types of things, and talking about being okay. And they're very, I think Aubrey Marcus is very in touch with both his femininity and his masculinity. And I feel like that is one of the biggest pieces that allows you to go into this stuff, because I think a lot of doing this work, it requires you to be very honest with yourself. And I feel like there's people that are so in touch with one side of themselves, maybe it's the masculine and not the feminine, that they're not even in touch with themselves enough to do that work. If they try and look inside, they're only looking inside at half of them, their being, because they don't feel like they have that permission to be emotional, to feel some of these other feelings, right? And I feel like a lot of times for me, every time emotion came up, anger was the only one I had, right? If I was sad, I'd get mad. If I was hurt, I'd get mad, right? Anger was this only thing I had. And I had to really get okay with being sad and getting okay with all these emotions, that you can go in and find out what happened to you as a kid. What do you feel these feelings? What happened to you at that point? What emotion was caused then that you didn't let manifest, that now is turned to anger, and now you supplement anger, right? Like,
yeah. And I think another thing, and you probably heard this when you listened to our pod, when we talked about the difficulties that men have in opening up to each other, and the difficulties that men have in having those conversations, right? Because, a lot of times it's like, we hold it in because it's like, you just deal with your shit. Like, it's part of you, everyone's got to grind, everyone's got to work. And there's elements to that, obviously I subscribe to as well. But at the same time, there's also empathy, right? And saying like, hey, like if I have issues, and I should be able to go to my guy friends, I should be able to open up to them and be like, hey, like I'm dealing with this, and maybe they're dealing with something similar, and we can have this kind of honest, thoughtful dialogue. And like you said, like, anger is not the only emotion that one can express. That's, like a lot of men think that's like, oh, if I'm angry, right? Where it's like, well, no, there's sadness, there's empathy, there's disappointment, surprise, there's all these things that you can express, the whole gamut. And I think one thing I'm optimistic about now is that men are becoming more comfortable in showing the full gamut of their emotions, and also more comfortable among their guy friends, or at least the guys that I'm around. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think that's something, when I was talking earlier about listening to a podcast and you want to get your 2 cents in and just being that frustration, I was listening to that episode, and I wanted so much to talk about that too, because I feel like that is something where, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else that said it, was a lot of times it ends up being your, as a man, you don't open up to your friends, and you get a girlfriend and you download everyone. I'm not a talker. I never have been, but always it was my girlfriend. They get, I'm a crazy motherfucker. There's a lot of shit going on up here. And I would just throw that all out on these people, but I wasn't doing any of that work. So they were just getting it. And they're saying, well, what do you want me to do with it? Like, you've got to figure this out on your own. Right. But I just lay it onto them. And now when I started doing that work, is I have that sounding board to bounce things off of and to talk it through, but I'm actually doing the work. So it's not like I'm just, okay, here's all my baggage, hold it for me. It's okay, here's my baggage, let's both hold it. Let's help me move through this, and let's get some of this gone. Right. And now that baggage is less and less, and you're actually working on it, which is a very different dynamic than just throwing it all to the significant other and say, hey, hold this for me. Right. I'm not going to work on it. I don't even want to talk about it. If you bring it up, I'm going to get mad actually, but you know what I mean? Like,
you know what? That's 100%. And that episode, funny enough, so that's one of our most popular episodes. And that one blew up with our female audience. Yeah. We had so many people who were like, thank you for doing this. Holy shit, we needed this. And one person, funny enough, and I shot this audience member out, and she was just like, cause I think when Tony was saying like, hey, like, maybe it's because women are just better at expressing their emotions. And one of the things our audience member said was like, well, part of that, is also because men have been told they can't for so long. Like it's been socialized into them since they were kids. Like you can't express your emotions in this way, otherwise it'll be seen as feminine, right?
Yeah.
And so it's social conditioning that also has to be unlearned as well, right? And so, yeah, man, like I that episode was one of my favorites. I'm really happy we put that out, and that was part of the reason why. It's just we tapped into the zeitgeist, and men reacted with it, and women especially were like, yes, get women to start talking to each other so we're not dealing with all their shit.
Exactly. And I think that is that is such an important thing. And maybe I know we got to wrap this up, so maybe I'll end it here. I know you asked me if there's any books or things that help me start doing that work. And I think maybe more than any of those things, what I can recommend to people is just, it's all about forward momentum. Once you start at once, if you find one area, if you look for one thing in life where you find you overreact, or somebody brings up this one thing, maybe it's your weight, maybe it's your dynamic with your dad, maybe it's whatever that is that really triggers you and reacts to you, just sit with that. Think about it. Take yourself back. Why do you think that happened? When's the first memory you ever had of overreacting to that, right? Like, and try and go back and find out why, and then try and find some forgiveness around it. Like myself, I think the first one I did was my weight, and always my family was very much on me about my weight and stuff. And that really pushed me to the other side, because I never wanted to lose weight, because then I'd be doing it for them. And, I don't care about this shit and all this, and finding some forgiveness there and saying like, they just loved me. They wanted the best for me. Like it wasn't ever intended to hurt. I know that's how it got to, and just to find forgiveness around that. If you can find that one area and have one success in doing that deep work, and just finding a little bit of forgiveness or understanding, and, healing just that one trauma, the benefits you'll see will be so apparent that it's like a drug, right? That doing your own work and that shadow work is one of the hardest things you can do. But once you do it once and you see the impact, and you see how much you grow as a person, and the immediately applicable things you can bring to your life, now you're looking for the next one. Okay, what can I do? How can I get better here? And it will build upon itself. It's just about having that courage to do it once, and to go into that, and to see that, because that's your natural instinct. Everybody's is to, when you see something like that, where you overreact and you see something in yourself you don't like, is to, let's not think about that, compartmentalize that away. But that's where, if you see something that scares you, you got to dive in. And when you notice those things in your life, you got to dig deep, and you got to do it. And it's going to suck ass at the start, but it does get better. And that's what I'd recommend to people. Just take that first step of find that one thing, and try and sit with it, and find out what it is, and trying to find a little bit of closure there. And you will then find areas later on, and you start to do that. And I feel like for a lot of people, that's what therapy is they take you through that, and they give you a safe space to take you through a couple of them, and they give you those wins. And I think for people that can afford it and can do that, I would recommend that to everybody. But even if you can, or even if you're not there yet at that point and you can't afford it, I think you can always afford it and you can make it work, but you can do that on your own. It's just about having that first step, and maybe that's therapy, or maybe that's just a really good friend that you can open up to that will help you accomplish that first one. But just get over that first one, and then they'll all start to come, and they'll all start to fall into place. So maybe more than any book I can recommend, or any podcast I can recommend, I would say that is the most important thing, is just to get started and dive in. Once you're in it, it's an awesome journey, and you'll see it start to pay off. So.
No, that's some great insights, great thoughts, man. Thank you for sharing. And even with the resources and stuff like Operating Markets, I'm definitely going to check that out as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you want a podcast, just hit me up. I'm currently building it out. I have this whole spreadsheet of all the different podcasts. Like it's over 100, like hundreds of podcasts I listen to, and like, wow, like which ones and like what areas. I'm trying to format it all and put it into a website of like somewhere where people can go and like have resources to learn about these podcasts that I put a lot of time into learning, and I know what you're going to get out of them. Like, are you looking to, do that deep work? Okay, maybe go to Aubrey Marks. Are you just looking to laugh? Maybe go to Flagrant 2. Are you looking to, learn more about this culture? Go to this one, right? And that sort of thing, because I think there's so much inside these podcasts, and it's so much of a gamble for people to dive into, because they don't know what you're going to get out of this podcast. You might have to listen to 10 episodes before you really truly understand that. But if someone's already done that work and they can lay that out for you, something you can bring forward. So it's another thing that's coming. I have so many big plans of things I want to bring in the future for this podcast.
Love it. I love the energy, man. Honestly, I love the energy, and I love what I've really enjoyed about this conversation is like the fact that you're willing to go nuanced, you're willing to go thoughtful, you're willing to go long form, you're willing to have this debate, and also just how passionate you are about this space. It bleeds through. And I think
Awesome.
I appreciated the opportunity, I guess, for your listeners. Thank you for listening to us, or 2 hours or whatever it's been. And if you're liking listening to me, I do a podcast with 2 other good friends called The Cusp. Lots of banter, lots of debate, lots of critical insight. And, it's a lot of fun for us to listen, and we'd love to hear from you. If you listen, if you enjoy it, or if you have feedback, let us know. And so I'll depart on those words, I guess. Thank you for introducing me, man.
Thanks again. And I'm sure you'll be on again in the future, and hopefully next time we can do it in person.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks again, brother.
No problem.
All right. Another one in the books. Like I said, really special episode coming up for number 50 next week. And if you guys can follow all my social medias, that helps. Pass it on to a friend. That's always helpful. Hope you guys are doing well. Things are starting to look up. Numbers are good. Weather's getting better. People are starting to push back. Restrictions are being forced to be lifted. I love to see it. Keep fighting the good fight. Keep that chin up. Things are getting better. Love all you guys. I can't do this without you guys listening. Every person that has reached out and talked to me and said, I enjoyed this episode or that episode. That's what keeps me going. That's what makes us all worth it. And thank you guys for that. Thanks for being here along with this ride with me. And I'll keep trying to get better for you guys. And other than that, I hope you enjoy your week. And I'll see you on the next one.